Chapter 2561. In the imperial capital, Xianyuan Hongshan looked majestic as he looked at the royal uncles and princes in the monarch palace. However, most of them were not willing to help him. Royal uncles, royal brothers, who is willing to help me fight the south and defend the south with Lord Taihao? Xianyuan Hongshan glanced at the royal palace and asked. None of them said a word. Even Taihao couldn't defend the south. Who could be stronger than Lord Taihao? No one was willing to do such a troublesome task. In such a big celestial nation, with so many royal bloodlines, no one can defend the south? Xianyuan Hongshan took a deep breath and asked again. Xianyuan Hongshan's eyes were sharp and he clenched his fists, unable to accept such a situation. Then this emperor will personally lead the troops to the south. If I die in battle, you will elect another imperial uncle to be the emperor. If the south is still not defended, then the emperor will have to personally lead the troops to the south until the bloodline of the imperial family runs dry. Whoever dares to give up an inch of land is not a member of the Xianyuan clan. You will not be allowed to enter the imperial tomb even if you die. Xianyuan Hongshan shouted. Your Majesty, you can't. Out of the 5 great celestial nations, none of the kings are leading the army. If you lead the army, won't you be telling the others that there is no one in our celestial nation? Xianyuan Xianshan immediately stepped forward and dissuaded him. Xianyuan Hongshan sneered and asked back, is there anyone in our celestial nation that can be used? Yan Jun and the other marquises are fighting Zun Long's army. Heaven's suppressing palace is being held back by Jingfan Mountain. You have so many royal bloodlines, but none of you dare to go to the front lines to defend the south. Other than me, is there anyone better? The royal uncles were sweating profusely. They didn't want to participate in missions that were bound to fail, but they also didn't want Xianyuan Hongshan to lead the army. They were not afraid of him dying, but they were afraid that the entire celestial nation would be defeated. Your Majesty, you can awaken Heaven's suppressing Marquis. With him as the vanguard, Lord Taihao will definitely be able to defend the south. Xianyuan Xianshan immediately reminded. Of course, Xianyuan Hongshan knew that Yi Qinghan could be used to defend the south. But if Yi Qinghan came out now, his cultivation level would stagnate. This was equivalent to killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. What if he wanted to use him against the other marquises in the future? We can't touch the heaven-suppressing Marquis right now. We can only use him when he comes out of seclusion. Unless the celestial empire completely collapses, we can only awaken him in advance. Marquis Yan Jun and the first Marquis Yan Jun and the Marquis Yan Jun did not bring the others. Marquis Yan Jun and first Marquis and Lord Marquis. Kakaka. Xianyuan Hongshan's heart was filled with rage. Staring at these useless uncles and brothers of the royal clan, she felt extreme disdain. Just based on this bunch of people, they still wanted to contend for the position of the immortal emperor? Luckily, she insisted on seizing the position of the crown prince. If not, how many years would the Qingzuan immortal empire be able to last if this bunch of trash seized the position of the immortal emperor? Haha. Xianyuan Hongshan was so angry that he laughed. He looked down at the crowd and said, are you trying to tell the world that there is no one in the imperial family that can stand up to you? The voices in the palace stopped abruptly. Many were sweating profusely. At this time, Xianyuan Jitsong stepped forward and said, Jitsong, am willing to fight for you. I don't know how to lead, but I know how to charge. I am willing to use my body to show the imperial family's might. Xianyuan Hong took a few deep breaths and looked at Xianyuan Jitsong. She knew that he was a hot-blooded man, but hot-bloodedness wasn't enough. He had to know how to fight and how to lead troops. Even if Prince Jitsong could go, he would need a few imperial uncles to go with him. Good, Jitsong, heaven-suppressing Marquis thinks highly of you, and so do I. I will take you as my brother. Are there any other Marquis Yan Jun who is willing to fight for me? Xianyuan Hongshan asked. No one said a word. Are you afraid of dying or not being able to complete your mission? Xianyuan Hongshan asked angrily. What? Everyone stepped forward and said respectfully. We have not been on the battlefield many times. We can lead tens of thousands of men, but this is a battle of millions of men. How can we fight against 2 great powers together? We can die, but we can't ruin the empire. Xinyuan Hongshan let out a deep breath. He knew that relying on these Marquis Yanjun was not going to work. Marquis Pingyang, go to the Heaven-Suppressing Palace and see if you can borrow a few Marquis Yanjun. Tell them that the imperial family is a bunch of dead people. Useless trash. Useless. Xinyuan Hongshan said angrily. He turned to the people in the palace and said, "Your titles and titles will be removed. Jitsong will be named Marquis Jitsong. He will lead millions of men and show the might of our empire." What? In an instant, all the Marquis Yanjun's titles and titles were removed. Everyone's face changed drastically. However, the four primordial kings looked down at them coldly. Whoever dared to offend Xinyuan Hongshan today, Xinyuan Hongshan would kill them without mercy. From today onwards, all of you will stay in the imperial capital. Don't even think about going anywhere. I will also treat you as Marquis Yanjun's Marquis Yanjun. If you dare to do anything, I'm afraid your heads won't be enough. Xinyuan Hongshan warned them coldly. Everyone's hair stood on end. Although they were dissatisfied, they did not dare to say anything. Hand over all your private armies. You dare to hide your private armies? You will be sentenced to death. Hand over all the military provisions you've embezzled over the years, and I'll leave you with some basic household expenses. Later, someone will come and confiscate your property. You'd best consider the consequences. Don't stop them, and don't try to hide anything. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. Xinyuan Hong said sternly. Your Majesty. The faces of many of the royal bloodlines changed, but when they looked up at Xinyuan Hongshan, they saw that his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Even the royal uncles didn't dare to say anything. Xinyuan Hong looked at this group of trash and snorted, "If you've thought it through and want to establish the might of my Xinyuan bloodline, then come and find me. I will consider awarding you according to your contributions." Zisong, you are in charge of all the private armies of the imperial uncles, imperial brothers, imperial princes, and imperial descendants. Execute the entire family. If anyone is found to be hiding soldiers' pay and provisions, kill them all. Show no mercy. Xinyuan Hongshan gave the final order and said coldly. Said Xinyuan Jitsong while kneeling on one knee. At this moment, Xinyuan Jitsong understood why Yi Qinghan didn't recommend him to be the crown prince or the country lord. Perhaps only the North vanquishing prince could make such a decision. When the emperor was angry, corpses would float for thousands of miles. When Xinyuan Hong was angry, all the titles of the imperial uncles and princes were revoked. Their fiefs were taken away, and their private armies and properties were seized. Furthermore, she gave a death order that anyone who dared to resist would be killed without mercy. Even the second prince and the third prince would not dare to give such an order. Primordial Wind King, you will accompany Marquis Jitsong to take over the private armies and provisions. As for their fiefs, take them back and put them under control. Don't allow them to leave the capital. If anyone dares to leave, there is no need to report to me. Just kill them, said Xinyuan Hong coldly. Yes, Your Majesty, said the inheritor of the primordial wind god respectfully. Chapter 2562. Xinyuan Hongshan's actions were swift and decisive. In just a single day, he removed the titles and lands of all the royal family members, confiscated the military funds and properties, and at the same time, requested for help from the Heaven-Suppressing Palace, hoping that Guangzhong's vanguard could help the southern region. The emperor was really old now. He couldn't even defend the city, let alone attack. With the loss of the southern region's territories, Emperor Taihao's face was filled with sorrow and helplessness. The 6 marquises were also at their wits' end. After all, the other side had quite a number of marquises and they couldn't turn the situation around. Marquises against marquises, the 6 marquises were all pinned down. Sigh. Emperor Taihao felt helpless as there was no one in the army. If only we had a few dozen vanguards like Guangzhong, we wouldn't be in such a state. Emperor Taihao stood on the city wall, looking at the land before him being devoured by the enemy. His heart was filled with sorrow and he seemed to have aged a lot. The 6 marquises quickly stepped forward and comforted him. Emperor, don't be sad. This is just the beginning. We will take back the cities one by one in the future, and we will do it even more. Take back the cities? Emperor Tai Hao's back was filled with despair. He knew very well that if they couldn't even defend the cities, they wouldn't even be able to attack them in the future. How's the situation in the north? Asked Emperor Tai Hao with a hoarse voice. Marquis Tai quickly stepped forward and said, Marquis Yan Jun is in a standoff with Marquis Zun Long's army. Marquis Zun Long is making arrangements and he doesn't dare to attack Marquis Yan Jun's army for fear of being entangled. On the other hand, Marquis Wenzhong's army of 3 million was wiped out by the heaven-suppressing palace. Emperor Tai Hao nodded happily and asked, What's the matter? Speak. Beads of sweat appeared on Marquis Tai's forehead and he whispered, Some time ago, the monarch was furious. He removed all the titles, lands, and properties of the royal family. The embezzled military funds were also confiscated and the private armies were all taken over by Prince Zhizong. Prince Zhizong is now Marquis Zhizong. What? All their titles were removed? Emperor Tai Hao was shocked and he asked, What happened in the capital? Is Hongshan trying to take revenge on the other royal bloodlines? Marquis Tai didn't dare to lie, so he quickly explained, That's not it. His Majesty hoped that the imperial family would stand out and help your Majesty block the southern border's defeat. Unfortunately, no one from the imperial family stood out. Only Prince Zhizong stood out, which infuriated the monarch. He directly revoked all the titles and fiefs of the imperial family. All of them were imprisoned in the imperial mansions and were not allowed to leave the city. Some people who were not afraid of death dared to challenge the monarch's bottom line. They were directly executed on the spot. Hiss! The Grand Emperor gasped. He didn't expect North vanquishing Prince to be so ruthless and decisive. Well done. You've ruined the prestige of our royal family. This is the kind of ruler my celestial nation should have. Instead of getting angry, Emperor Tai Hao was overjoyed. He said to Marquis Tai, Send a message back and say that I, as the emperor, support him. Whoever dares to act recklessly, regardless of which prince they are, will be killed without mercy. Beads of cold sweat appeared on Marquis Tai's forehead. Things were different now. Even his imperial uncle was going to be killed. Now it was time to see which marquis was going to die. In the heaven-suppressing prefecture, Marquis Pingyang traveled at full speed. It took him a few days to reach the heaven-suppressing prefecture city. Lu Aotian was currently in the prefecture city, controlling everything and personally receiving Marquis Pingyang. However, Marquis Pingyang did not dare to waste any time here. He spoke to Lu Aotian as an equal. Marshal Lu, I am here under His Majesty's order to borrow some men from you. I hope that you can transfer some of the vanguards from the heaven-suppressing prefecture to the south with me. The south is in a critical situation. Emperor Tai Hao can't handle it and the royal family has no men left. Their titles and lands have all been revoked by His Majesty. I can only borrow some men from you to salvage the situation. Lu Aotian was shocked. He didn't expect the South to be in such a difficult situation. My insane sex vanguards have just stepped into the Xian immortal level. I'm afraid they can't handle the heavy responsibility. Lu Aotian said honestly. Marquis Pingyang was also anxious. If the heaven-suppressing prefecture couldn't be lent and the royal family's cowards couldn't be used, they couldn't just give up on the South. His Majesty is already enraged. I heard that he has already killed 3 royal uncles. If the South still can't be stabilized, I'm afraid he will personally lead the army. By then, not only will his safety be a problem, the entire celestial nation's morale will be greatly reduced. Marquis Pingyang said solemnly. Lu Aotian remained silent for a long time. This was not a joke. Borrowing the insane sex Xian immortal level experts could easily lead to death. After all, the South's army was not the insane sex army. Who knew how strong the army was? If they didn't cooperate well, they would definitely die. The deaths of the insane sex intersect elders was a loss that no one could bear. Such a vast celestial nation, don't you have any vanguards? What about the rich and powerful clan's chief inheritors? What about the Heaven Board experts? Lu Aotian frowned. Marquis Pingyang said solemnly, Prestige. No matter how strong they are, they won't be able to raise the morale of an army. but your insane sex vanguards, the war back then, had inspired the hearts of the people and became the dream of many. With them in the south, the entire army's morale will be different. His Majesty is old now. I dare say that if Yen Ho becomes the commander of the south, the army can easily turn defeat into victory. It's the same army, but the spirit of the leader is different. If heaven-suppressing Marquis and Yen Ho are both present, not to mention turning defeat into victory, they can even infiltrate the endless peak mountain. If that's the case, let Chess Saint replace Yen Ho and let Yen Ho follow you to the south. Lu Outyen said firmly. Chess Saint's 5 million private army will be brought into the war zone for training. You don't have to worry about him not being able to coordinate with the army in a short period of time. You can also use the 5 million soldiers to let the other armies have a rough understanding of Chess Saint. The army's morale will not drop. Marquis Pingyang was shocked. He did not know Chess Saint, so he quickly waved his hand and said, absolutely not. Without Yen Ho, I don't think anyone will be able to stop Zun Long Ho. Besides, it's a taboo to change the commander. Lu Outyen smirked and said confidently, if Chess Saint can't stop Zun Long Ho, then Yen Ao can't stop him either. If you don't believe me, you can wake our boss and he will give you the same answer. As for the risk of changing the commander, Yen Ho and Chess Saint will take care of it. What do you mean? Who is this Chess Saint? Marquis Pingyang frowned and asked. Lu Outyen said calmly, back in the small realm, Yen Ao wanted to take Chess Saint as his teacher. Chess Saint's military strategy is definitely not inferior to Yen Ho's. Think about it, if Chess Saint is not capable enough, why would our boss allow him to take over the heaven-suppressing palace's 5 million private army? Am I not capable enough? Since our boss chose him, it means that Chess Saint is much stronger than me and I am confident that I won't lose to Yen Ho by too much. Then is it all right for the North Fortress to lose the 5 million private army? Marquis Pingyang asked cautiously. Lu Outyen smiled confidently and looked at the North Divine region in the east. He said calmly, if Zhang Fan is not stupid, he will definitely not attack the North Fortress. Don't forget that the North Fortress is guarded by Sovereign Yi. When Zhong Wang's 3 million soldiers were all wiped out in the North Fortress while Sovereign Yi only lost a city. Chapter 2563. Faced with Lu Outyen's insistence, Marquis Pingyang was a little hesitant. A sudden change of commander would definitely be more dangerous than losing the southern region. If the northern region was lost, the imperial capital would be taken over by Marquis Zun Long and no one would be able to save the situation. Commander Lu, do you think this will create a greater crisis? Asked Marquis Pingyang. Lu Outyen shook his head and said confidently, there won't be any danger. As long as you let Yen Ho and Chess Saint handle it well, there won't be any problems. The two of them will definitely have a better way than me, so I won't say much. This is the best help our heaven-suppressing palace can provide. If you are afraid of a greater danger, I have no other better way. Then please show me the commander's seal and allow me to mobilize the 5 million private soldiers. I will be responsible for transporting them to the Lingyang military region. Marquis Pingyang bowed slightly, giving Lu Outyen enough face as he was representing heaven suppressing Marquis. The commander's seal was in Emperor Ye's hands and Lu Outyen quickly sent someone to invite Emperor Yi out. Half a day later, Emperor Yi came out from the inner sect with the commander's seal. When he heard that Xianyuan Hongshan wanted to borrow soldiers to defend the southern region, he did not refute Lu Outyen's words and handed half of the commander's seal to Marquis Pingyang. Words cannot express my gratitude. Once the situation is stabilized, His Majesty will come personally to thank heaven-suppressing Marquis. Marquis Pingyang bowed and said gratefully. Lu Outyen and Emperor Yi did not dare to accept the bow of a first-grade Marquis and they quickly went up to help him up. Marquis Pingyang, the situation now waits for no one. Before the southern region crumbles, you should let Yen Ao take over the southern region. Lu Outyen immediately said. Marquis Pingyang nodded and left the heaven-suppressing palace district, heading towards the back of the northern region. Now, Chess Saint was leading the 5 million soldiers and was constantly training them, controlling their compatibility and increasing their control over them. The army's combat power was increasing day by day. At this moment, the army formed a whirlpool. Once it moved, It would devour the stars like a black hole. This array was created by Chess Saint by observing the weather, and it was called the heaven-devouring moon array. Wah! The army's flag changed unpredictably, and the army moved like the wind. They were already very familiar with the array, and it looked very imposing. It made one feel powerless. Who could fight against an endless black hole? Marquis Pingyang, who had just arrived at the northern stronghold, observed from afar and felt his scalp go numb. He even doubted whether the 5 million strong army could slay a golden immortal. With this kind of army, Marquis Pingyang's body flashed and was about to land on Chess Saint's war chariot, but Chess Saint reacted quickly. With a wave of his flag, the 5 million strong army rotated and stirred up space. Even space was distorted as Chess Saint's war chariot was teleported away. Following that, the vortex's mouth widened and swallowed Marquis Pingyang into the army. Boom! Marquis Pingyang's aura shook. The third level of a big shot's power was overwhelming. The immortal patterns shook the sky and forced the army back. However, no one was sent flying. At this moment, the army had already formed a whole. When Marquis Pingyang's aura shook a part of the army, the impact was absorbed by the entire army. When it was distributed to an individual, it only made them take half a step back. Chess Saint also realized that the other party was the Marquis of Immortal Emperor Qing Zun. However, he did not stop. Instead, he waved the war flag and mobilized the army to attack. He used Marquis Pingyang to train the army. Wah wah wah. Boom boom boom. Kill. If a big shot at the beginner level of the Gold Immortal Realm was here, his entire aura would have been shaken apart. At that moment, Marquis Pingyang felt his blood flow stagnating, as though he had been intimidated by an unparalleled expert. What if the 5 million army rotated and changed unpredictably? They began to devour the sky and the moon. The sun and moon were no longer there. Dark clouds covered the sky. The immortal spiritual power in the world went out of control, and the laws were ineffective. However, the 5 million army that was using the array was not affected. Marquis Pingyang did not want to kill the army. He just kept dodging and mobilized 30% of his strength. However, after using 30% of his strength, he was repelled several times. He kept increasing his strength. After a few times, he increased it to 40%. This was equivalent to the peak of the early stage of the Golden Immortal Realm. He attacked again, and the army gradually fell into a disadvantage. Wah wah wah. Woo 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 at the bugle horn sounded, and it resounded through the sky. Dong dong dong. The sound of the military drums awakened the army's blood flow. It was as if an ancient war had descended. Boom boom boom. Thunder tore through the mountains and rivers. Bolts of lightning struck down and headed straight for Marquis Pingyang. Hiss hiss hiss. Marquis Pingyang was shocked. He did not expect Chess Saint to have comprehended the principles of heaven and earth. He could mobilize the power of the universe and stars and use the 5 elements to fight against experts. Boomed out a bolt of lightning as thick as an arm tore through the mountains and rivers and appeared above Marquis Pingyang's head. Bang! Marquis Pingyang did not panic in the face of danger. He waved his hand and shattered the shackles. A faint golden light appeared in his palm. He struck the lightning with his palm. The lightning did not penetrate his third layer of defense. Instead, it pushed him back several meters. Hiss hiss hiss. Marquis Pingyang was more and more shocked. Chess Saint was giving him more and more surprises. Such an army was absolutely invincible. It was even more terrifying and destructive than Yen Ao's phalanx. It was enough to fight against the early stage of the Golden Immortal Realm. Boom boom boom. Tens of thousands of Mystic Immortal Realm experts gathered into a long dragon. The expert in the lead pierced through the mountains and rivers with his spear. He pressed on toward Marquis Pingyang and wanted to kill him by force. Wah wah wah. Marquis Pingyang formed seals with his palms. Monstrous power gathered in his palms. It was enough to crush a small city. This was only 40% of his strength. Boom! The two attacks collided. The aftershock was constantly swallowed by the vortex. It could not cause any harm to the army at all. The army was as strong as a rainbow. The huge dragon did not retreat. However, the leader of the attackers was already coughing up blood. His face was pale. Zeng 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 zenged. Although Marquis Pingyang had only mobilized the peak of the early stage of the Golden Immortal Realm, it was still very powerful. However, he was being continuously pushed back by the army. Although his defense was not broken, his hands were in pain. His expression changed. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Another huge dragon soared into the sky. Tens of thousands of soldiers cooperated and attacked from the front left. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The third attack appeared, forming a triangular formation. Swoosh. Marquis Pingyang wanted to break out of the encirclement. However, countless lightning bolts appeared in the sky. They were enough to tear apart the defense of the early stage of the Golden Immortal Realm. He could not break out at all. Boom! Marquis Pingyang's eyes shone with divine light. His aura was rising. He no longer suppressed it and directly rushed to the middle stage of the Golden Immortal Realm. The situation was reversed. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The war flag danced. The military drums were vast and mighty. They approached the North Divine region. Even Zhang Fan was alarmed. He looked at the dark clouds covering the sky in the north town. The terrifying pressure seemed to be able to swallow him. Gulp! Zhang Fan swallowed a mouthful of saliva. His expression changed. He said to himself in a hoarse voice, "What's going on? A battle between golden immortals?" Swoosh! Zhang Fan took the air and approached the north town city. He saw that the 5 million private army had forced Pingyang, a big shot in the third stage, to panic. His eyes turned red. Chapter 2564. Zhang Fan was also shocked. Under normal circumstances, an army wouldn't be able to do anything to a golden immortal. In the worst-case scenario, the golden immortal couldn't do anything to the army and the army couldn't do anything to the golden immortal. But now, the tables were turned. Marquis Pingyang was only suppressed to the peak of golden immortal level, but he couldn't stop the army's attack. North Town City. When Yi Tian saw Zhang Fan running to the city, he quickly went up and said respectfully, "The son of heaven suppressing Marquis, Yi Tian, greets Senior." Zhang Fan looked at Yi Tian and saw Yi Qinghan's shadow in him. He nodded and said, "And like father, like son. Not bad. You're in charge of North Town City now?" Yi Tian quickly nodded and said, "Senior, I'm in charge of North Town City for now. Don't worry, my father has repeatedly emphasized that we can't attack Jing Fan City and Jing Fan Army." Zhang Fan laughed and said, "At least that kid has some conscience. Don't worry, I was forced to guard the north. I have no interest in attacking North Town City and heaven-suppressing prefecture. Marquis Long should know that I won't attack you first." Yi Tian bowed and greeted Zhang Fan respectfully. Zhang Fan looked at North Town City, pointed at the army and said, "Who's commanding that army? Isn't Yan Ao in the Lingyang battlefront?" Yi Tian shook his head and said, "He's not Martial Uncle Yan Ao. As for who he is, it's a tactical secret. Forgive me for not being able to say." Zhang Fan's face turned serious. He didn't expect the Quang Manor to have a military saint that was on par with Yan Ao. This person's tactical deduction might be even more terrifying than Yan Ao's. "I'm leaving. When your father comes out, tell him to come find me. I have something to talk to him about." Zhang Fan said calmly and disappeared into the sky above North Town City. A few hours later, the dark clouds above North Town City. The army adjusted themselves and returned to their positions. Their morale was high and they didn't even flinch when facing a golden immortal. Chess Saint stared at Marquis Pingyang as he held half of the commander's seal in his hand. He immediately cupped his fists and bowed. "Greetings, Marquis." I was still a little doubtful that Marshal Lu would praise the Chess Saint so highly. After today's battle, I am completely convinced that your crazed manor is full of talents. Just based on today's move, I am certain that you will not lose to Marquis Yanjun. I am impressed. Marquis Pingyang bowed and said, "The one who is superior is the teacher. The chess sage's ability to lead troops is 1,000 times better than mine. Please accept my bow." The chess saint got up and avoided Marquis Pingyang's bow. However, his confidence came from his bones. In terms of strategy, Yan Ao was not his match. "Marquis, your commander's seal?" Chess Saint asked curiously. Marquis Pingyang immediately said, It was His Majesty who requested the crazed manor to help defend the southern war zone. Marshal Liu agreed to let you take over Yen Ao's position and request that Yen Ao head to the southern war zone to salvage the situation. Chess Saint, please take action and follow me to the Spirit Central war zone. The commander's seal had already been brought over, and on the surface, Emperor Yi had agreed. The Chess Saint did not say anything else and said, as the Marquis commands, please transport these 5 million soldiers away. Marquis Pingyang was a third-stage big shot. His world was much more exaggerated than the eternal world. It was so advanced that it could produce a perfected mystic immortal. It could even produce a first-stage golden immortal. He controlled space-time with both hands, and his world entrance appeared in front of him. The path to the heavens was unobstructed. Whoosh! The Chess Saint did not hesitate and mobilized the army into Marquis Pingyang's world. After another hour, the Chess Supremacy brought the 5 million private soldiers and headed straight for the Spirit Central war zone. At this moment, in the hinterlands of the Northern Divine region, 1,000 defeated soldiers avoided the cities and rapidly approached the richest area of the Northern Divine region, the hunting grounds of the royal family. Supreme Yi rode on the neck of a young man, feeling smug. He did not feel tired at all. However, the young man he was riding was panting heavily. He had been running for several months without rest. The immortal spiritual power in his body was almost depleted. Wellington, look at how embarrassing you are. Hurry up and dig a hole with your halberd and bury yourself. You're panting like this after carrying me for such a short distance. Are you weak in the kidneys? Supreme Yi said unhappily. Hua Lingtian was one of the top 20 people of the younger generation on the heaven leaderboard. He had been insulted countless times by Supreme Yi along the way. His forehead was full of black lines. Boss, we've been running for a few months, and they still have time to rest. I don't even have time to sit down and rest. Can't you just sit on someone else's neck? Hua Lingtian's handsome face was full of dissatisfaction as he said in a muffled voice. I'm sitting on your neck because I think highly of you. Who asked me to find you pleasing to the eye? I'm not interested even if others want me to sit on them. Stop talking nonsense. We're almost at the hunting grounds. Once we reach the hunting grounds, you'll benefit from it, Supreme Yi urged. The others could not help but snicker. Hua Lingtian's combat strength was extremely exaggerated. He was a mid-stage mystic immortal and ranked in the top 20 of the overall heaven leaderboard. He was invincible among supremes of the same level. Supreme Yi only sat on his neck because of his combat strength. Sigh, Hua Lingtian sighed. He had no choice but to speed up with Supreme Yi and enter the mountain range. As soon as they entered the hunting grounds, immortal spiritual energy rushed into their bodies. There was obviously a powerful spirit gathering formation around them. However, because it was wartime, the royal family's hunting operations had been stopped. Only a few people were patrolling around. 1,000 troops sneaked into the hunting grounds and plundered resources wantonly. They did not even leave behind a low-grade immortal spiritual herb. They were completely like bandits. Supreme Yi only wanted supreme treasures and high-grade immortal materials. At this moment, Hua Lingtian was no longer dissatisfied. He wished he could tie Supreme Yi around his neck. Where are we going? Where are the good treasures? Golden immortal grade immortal fruits. Jinling flower. Oh my god. Hua Lingtian brought Supreme Yi deep into the hunting grounds. There were supreme treasures everywhere, but golden immortal grade immortal fruits were still very rare. However, the two of them could always find them. Hua Lingtian was over the moon. He munched on the high-grade mystic immortal grade immortal fruits and kept plundering immortal treasures. Supreme Yi was proud. He patted Hua Lingtian's head and said, "Follow me and you'll have a good life. I guarantee you won't regret it." Of course, of course. Hua Lingtian said excitedly. Under Supreme Ye's lead, 1,000 bandits swept through the hunting grounds. The immortal phoenix intimidated those powerful immortal beasts. The ferocious beasts with primordial bloodlines did not dare to move. They could only crawl on the ground and let them plunder the resources. Their eyes were red from staring. Unfortunately, Marquis Zun Long's main focus was on Yen Ao. Who would have thought that his hunting grounds would be swept by Supreme Yi? More than 10 days later, Marquis Pingyang brought 5 million troops and Chess Saint to the Spirit Central Battleground to find Yen Ao. When Yen Ao found out that the southern battleground was so decadent that more than 10 major cities had been taken down consecutively, his expression turned ugly. After discussing with Chess Saint, he decided to take the initiative to attack. He would first let Chess Saint catch the revered dragon army off guard. After establishing his power, he would let Chess Saint take over the Spirit Central Battleground. He would then bring 5 million troops to the southern battleground. This way, the crisis of a temporary change of commander could be resolved. Dong dong dong. The 5 million private troops stepped out of Marquis Pingyang's Stage 3 Golden Immortal Realm Great World. The troops were neat and orderly. Their momentum was like a rainbow. They held 3-meter-long spears in their hands and pushed to the border. Chapter 2565. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Boom Boom Boom. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The 5 million-strong army's aura surged into the North Divine region. Marquis Zun Long had just finished setting up the Celestial Kingdom's defense and was about to launch an attack. But he did not expect the opposing army to take the initiative. Just in time. Wen Zhong's 3 million-strong army, I will use your 5 million men to pay for it. Marquis Zun Long shouted coldly, slammed the table and stood up with the divine dragon scepter in his hand. He personally led the army out of the camp and his aura shook the heavens. One side had the world-famous Marquis Zun Long as their commander while the other side had the unknown Chess Saint as their commander. But the 5 million-strong heaven-suppressing palace's private army was not afraid at all. They could even stop a golden immortal big shot, let alone a few million-strong army. Chess Saint waved the war flag and the army got into formation. It was still the heaven-swallowing moon converging formation. It was like a ferocious beast hiding in ambush, not threatening at all. But Marquis Pingyang knew that once this army moved, it would definitely be a meat grinder that would kill countless people. Big Boss Ling Yang sat beside Chess Saint and looked down at the army. She could roughly predict that once this army exploded, they might really be able to threaten a golden immortal big shot. But she did not believe Marquis Pingyang's words that this army could kill a first-stage golden immortal big shot. Boom. Marquis Zun Long looked at the army in disdain. He sat on the high platform and commanded the 4 million-strong army to go to the border personally. There were still a few million-strong army behind him to support him at any time. Yen Ao, are you not going to fight with me personally? Marquis Zun Long stood proudly on the command platform, the war flag beside him fluttering in the wind. His marquee battle robe fluttered loudly. Just him alone was enough to crush an army. Yen Ao stood at the back calmly and looked at the war zone coldly. He did not reply. Chess Saint smiled and said confidently, I have heard that Marquis Zun Long is the first person to lead an army into battle. I do not believe it and would like to challenge you. Nothing much? My opponent is Yen Ao. Marquis Zun Long's gaze pierced through the void and directly saw Yen Ao standing on the city wall. He circulated his immortal spiritual energy and muttered, Yen Ao, could it be that you're afraid of this Marquis? You actually didn't fight and sent a rotten person. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by the world? The Chess Saint wasn't angry. He just looked at the Chess Supreme with a smile. He waved the war flag in his hand, and the war horn sounded. The war drums boomed. Sob 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 sob, Jiang Jingtian, Gu Qingyu, Desolate Lord Yi, Xiahou He, Feng Huang, Li Feng, and Mo Li each commanded 7 armies. Their teamwork had reached the point of perfection. All they needed to do was listen to the drums, horns, and flags. The 7 armies changed into a square formation, and their heaven-swallowing momentum was already formed. The openings were already open, and they were quietly waiting for the revered dragon army to charge in. The revered dragon army's morale was high, and they were ready to go. They stepped into the border and entered Ling Yang's territory. The heavy armored infantry were at the front, and the dragon riders were in the middle. Even the archers were saved, because in a true great army, it would be difficult for bows and crossbows to penetrate the defenses of an army. Only a frontal assault would be effective. Boom boom boom. the sight of an army of close to 10 million was shocking. But as soon as they entered the array, the situation changed. Dark clouds covered the sky, and killing intent filled the air. In the blink of an eye, the revered dragon army's heavy armored infantry were devoured without any resistance. Kill. Boom boom boom. Dong dong dong, shouts of killing filled the air, and the 5 million heaven-suppressing palace's private army was like a meat grinder, devouring the lives. Corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like rivers. The lives of the people on the battlefield were worthless, and the experts roared in anger as they struggled in the whirlpool. Marquis Xuanlong's expression immediately changed. He immediately mobilized his army to tear apart the sky-swallowing moon-converging formation. However, after changing the formation dozens of times, and even using the Azure Dragon Guards and Blood Dragon Guards to join forces to charge at the front, it was a pity that no matter how many people came, they all died. The Azure Dragon Guards and Blood Dragon Guards suffered heavy casualties. Damn it! What kind of array is this? It can change the laws of time and space, distort the dimensions, and turn them into a whole. Lord Xuanlong's expression changed drastically. At this moment, there were already close to 1 million people swallowed into the array, and they were all devoured before they could even cause a ripple. What? Lord Xuanlong was caught off guard, and he didn't dare to delay any longer. He immediately waved the war flag and ordered the army to retreat. Dong dong dong. The military drums sounded, and the Xuanlong army that had yet to charge into the array quickly retreated. But the Quang Manor's private army took the initiative to attack. They turned into 2 dragons and charged at Lord Xuanlong's flanks. If the flanks were destroyed, Lord Xuanlong would be sucked into the array. Ling Yang stared at Lord Xuanlong like a tiger watching its prey. If Lord Xuanlong was sucked into the army, he would risk his life to stop Lord Xuanlong and kill him. Lord Xuanlong's expression changed drastically, and he immediately retreated out of Ling Yang's territory. Huayin, Jiang Jingtian and Gu Qingyu's armies slaughtered all the soldiers in the array, and they worked together to force their way to Lord Xuanlong's command platform. Huat xiu xiu xiu. The army went crazy, and they charged forward while stepping on the corpses. There were whirlpools within whirlpools, and black holes within black holes. Once trapped, no one could escape. Retreat! Retreat now! Lord Xuanlong's face turned pale, and if he didn't retreat now, the millions of soldiers would have to stay here. It wasn't that such an array was unbreakable, but it would require an army several times stronger than his. But he didn't have that many soldiers, and even if he did, Yan Ao was still waiting at the side. Even if he did, the reinforcements would still be devoured. Boom! Unfortunately, the revered Dragon Marquis' order came too late. The 2 armies led by Emperor Feng and Xiahou He penetrated the flanks of the revered Dragon Army, forcibly tearing it apart and drawing it into the Great Formation. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Desolate Lord Yi and Li Feng were in charge of replacing Xiahou He and Feng Huang. Xiahou He and Feng Huang were in charge of expelling the other half of the army, while Desolate Lord Yi and Li Feng cooperated with Jiang Jingtian and Gu Qingyu's 2 armies to encircle the encircled army. In a split second, Marquis Xuanlong was drawn into the army. Whoosh! The venerable Dragon Marquis was shocked. He immediately turned into a long rainbow and shot up into the sky, breaking through the void in an attempt to escape. However, in that instant, the sky was covered by dark clouds. Thunder and lightning as thick as an arm were almost on par with the thunder tribulation of the first stage of the Golden Immortal Realm. Even if it could not hurt the venerable Dragon Marquis, it could at least stop him for a short time. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Ling Yang and Ping Yang charged toward the battlefield, intending to join forces and slay the revered Dragon Marquis within the spell formation. The venerable Dragon Marquis did not dare to fight with the 2 in the spell formation. He immediately gave up on defense and tore through the lightning, allowing countless bolts of lightning to strike his body. He turned into a heavenly dragon and charged toward the northern godland. Boom! Crack! 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 Tens of thousands of bolts of lightning struck the venerable Dragon Marquis back, causing him to spit out blood. His face was pale as he fell heavily outside the northern godland's army. At least 2 marquises rushed out and protected the venerable Dragon Marquis as they fled to the rear. Of the 3 million-strong army that the revered Dragon Marquis had brought with him, not a single person was able to leave Ling Yang's fief. All of them were entangled and surrounded like dumplings. There were countless casualties, and some of them did not even have the chance to surrender and were directly killed. It was too fast. No one had expected the venerable Dragon Marquis to be defeated so quickly. There were no signs at all. They had only just charged into the spell formation when they sensed that something was wrong. Unfortunately, there was still no time for the venerable Dragon Marquis to bring away his own army. The 200,000 Blood Dragon Guards, the Azure Dragon Guards, the Dragon Cavalry, and the heavy infantry were all left on the battlefield. The battle flags swayed in the wind. It was an extremely tragic scene. However, the Quang Mansion's army was not that tragic. They did not even suffer many casualties. Instead, they captured hundreds of thousands of soldiers. On the city wall, Yan Ao slapped his head and said regretfully, "Fuck, I'm so stupid. If I was in the army just now, I could have led an army to attack the northern Godland. I could have cooperated with the Chess Saint to take down several main cities in the northern Godland and occupy important areas." Chapter 2566. Yan Ao was filled with regret, mainly because he did not expect Zun Long Marquis to lose so quickly. The heaven-devouring moon-gathering array was so powerful that it contained the principles of the star's movement and the Tao of chess. Every step was calculated with great precision. Yan Ao sighed in regret after missing such a good opportunity. He watched as Zun Long Marquis fled back to the Spirit Central battlefront. At the border of the North God Province, Zun Long Marquis' face turned pale as he felt his face was slapped swollen. He actually lost to a nameless junior. More importantly, he even mocked Chess Saint just an hour ago. But now, his army of 3 million was almost wiped out. They were not on the same level at all. Zun Long Marquis took a deep breath and immediately signaled for the other Golden Immortal experts to retreat back to the camp. The North God Province's terrain was strategic and it was difficult to cast such a great array. Chess Saint was not easy to attack, but in the plains of the Spirit Central battlefront, Zun Long Marquis would not even dare to attack. Damn it, I have underestimated my enemy. This strange array is so profound. Zun Long Marquis' face turned pale as he found an excuse for his failure. The other marquises also felt that their loss was too sudden. Most importantly, it was too fast. If they didn't know about the grudge between Zun Long Marquis and the Heaven-Suppressing Palace, they would have thought that Zun Long Marquis was a traitor. "Dao brother Zun Long, what should we do next?" One of the marquises clasped his fists and asked. Zun Long Marquis took a deep breath and said solemnly, "Retreat to the Demon Ceiling Cave and defend the North God Province with the help of the natural terrain. The other areas are mostly mountains, not suitable for marching. We just need to keep an eye on the enemy's marquises." Zun Long Marquis was thoroughly defeated, but he was not conceited. Knowing that he was no match for Chess Saint, he chose to retreat. Chess Saint also understood that if Yan Ao was in the army, he could have taken advantage of the situation to attack the North God Province. Unfortunately, he missed the chance. If he attacked forcefully, the losses would be too great. Thus, he did not plan to attack again. Instead, he defended the North Central battlefront and took over the army. Then, he trained them to cooperate with each other. Using the regular army to attack the cities was the most suitable. At this moment, the army in the Spirit Central battlefront fell into silence. Only after a long time, with excitement, Zun Long Ho. That was an undefeatable existence. If it wasn't for Yan Ao's fame, the morale of the Qingzun Immortal Empire's army would most probably have fallen. This battle caused the morale of the Northern War Zone to soar. The reputation of the chess sage instantly surpassed Marquis Zun Long and even Yan Ao. Roar! Howled, the army roared furiously, venting the pressure that had been building up in their hearts for the past few days. Marquis Ping Yang was extremely excited and wanted to bring the chess saint away. However, both Yan Ao and the chess saint would never agree to it. The Southern War Zone's army only recognized Yan Ao, and this was only one of the reasons. Furthermore, if the chess saint were to go to the Southern War Zone and the other marquises refused to cooperate, Marquis Ping Yang's private army would suffer great losses. This was equivalent to the heaven-suppressing palace's right-hand man being cut off. How could Yen Ao and the chess saint agree to it? In the final discussion, Yen Ao brought along 5 million regular soldiers and entered Marquis Ping Yang's world. As for Ling Yang, she was responsible for coordinating with Chess Saint to take over the northern war zone. At this moment, the southern war zone was in a precarious situation and could collapse at any moment. Once the army's morale collapsed, the southern war zone would fall completely. No one would be able to do anything about it. Marquis Ping Yang charged towards the southern war zone without holding back at all. It took him a few months to reach the southern war zone. At this moment, Emperor Tai Hao had lost a few more cities. The army's morale was low, and they had lost all will to fight. Even Prince Jitsong could not turn the situation around. On this day, an additional 5 million soldiers appeared in the southern war zone. Yen Ao led the army to Qingyang City in the south. The city was in ruins and corpses were piled up like mountains. Many civilians were massacred and their blood dyed the streets red. All the way to the northwest, everything had fallen. Yen Ao moved the war flag and rose into the air. The flag of Mark Yenjun was a symbol of faith. The 5 million soldiers were all cavalrymen. Their high-grade immortal horses were tall and mighty. Their 4 limbs were powerful and could move mountains and rivers. Dong dong dong. The might of the 5 million cavalrymen was extremely great. They followed the bloody path and pursued. In front of them, the 2 armies were clearly not from the same force. One was from the Endless Peak Mountain while the other was from the Sovereign Immortal Empire. They were unstoppable. The small cities did not even dare to resist and directly surrendered. The resources were plundered and the army was captured. The huge Sovereign Immortal Empire was already rotten to the core. How lamentable! Yen Ao sped up and stopped the 2 armies above a large plain. Kill. Leave no one alive. Be careful not to destroy the resources. Yen Ao ordered coldly. Kill! With a deafening sound, the 5 million soldiers split into 5 routes and traversed through the plain, forcefully tearing apart the army of 1 million. The flag of Mark Yenjun fluttered in the wind. His murderous aura soared into the sky. Just this aura alone was equivalent to winning half the battle. The 5 million cavalrymen were not the rotten army of the southern war zone. They were an army with faith. Every single one of them carried the belief that they would die. Their cooperation was flawless. Pucci, retreat, retreat. Unfortunately, they retreated a little too late. Even the commander of the 2 armies, the Marquis, ran out and was surrounded. In order to save time, Marquis Ping Yang directly stopped the Marquis. However, the Marquis was only a first-degree realm expert from the Sovereign Immortal Empire. He was forcefully defeated by Marquis Ping Yang's continuous attacks. The Marquis Ping Yang crashed through mountains and rivers and fell into the army. The army was unable to break through his defense, but they were able to send him flying. Whoosh, bang. Marquis Ping Yang's palm penetrated the Marquis Ping Yang's defense, causing the Marquis Ping Yang to cough out blood and fly backward. Bang bang bang. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At this moment, Marquis Ping Yang did not care if the other party was a golden immortal. During war, there were only enemies. There were no friends or strangers. If they were not teammates, then there was only death. You dare to kill me. Boom! Marquis Ping Yang pulled out the immortal beheading sword. The sword pierced through the void and penetrated the Marquis Ping Yang's sea of consciousness. He sneered, "What a joke! You have already invaded my sovereign immortal empire and I don't dare to kill you? Even if your uncle is here, I dare to kill him." The immortal killing sword was pulled out, golden divine blood flowing out. When it landed on the ground, even the mountain rocks were corroded. Primordial god race bloodline. It was a pity that they were suppressed by Marquis Ping Yang before they could unleash their advantage. Close to 1 million people could not even resist for 2 hours. Those who did not surrender were all killed. 2 hours later, Yen Ao began to order the army to clean up the battlefield. All the immortal rings were taken away and the immortal armors were bestowed to the army. Emperor Tai Hao is now in the Wind Rainbow main city. Let's go and meet up with him. After I hand you over to him, I will return to the imperial capital to protect the emperor. Marquis Pingyang received the message and immediately went forward. Yen Ao nodded. Then he ordered his men to burn the corpses with fire origin energy. Then he charged towards the Wind Rainbow main city with over 200,000 captives. In the Wind Rainbow main city, Emperor Tai Hao was surprised and happy when he heard that Yen Ao had personally gone to the southern war zone. He was happy because the situation in the southern war zone could be stabilized. However, who would control the northern war zone? Chapter 2567. Wind Rainbow main city was filled with experts. Yen Shuai's flag replaced Emperor Tai Hao's flag, calming the hearts of the people. The army that was already on the verge of collapse was stabilized. Emperor Tai Hao had aged a lot. He knew he was old and there were many things he couldn't change. After knowing that the northern war zone was controlled by a commander who was even more talented than Yen Ao, he couldn't help but feel relieved. Commander Yen, I'll leave the southern war zone to you. I'm old now. In the future, you will be the one assisting His Majesty. Don't disappoint me and Lord Immortal Emperor. Emperor Tai Hao said solemnly. Yen Ao bowed and said, Emperor, don't worry. Within 10 years, I will wipe out all the invaders. 100 years later, I will lead the army to invade the ultimate peak mountain and the sovereign immortal empire. Emperor Tai Hao smiled. For the royal clan to have such an assistant, it was the fortune of countless years of cultivation. With Yen Ao's arrival, the various nobles and powerful sects quickly brought their private armies to cooperate with him and prepare for a counterattack to reclaim their lost territories. Yen Ao's 5 million cavalry was the main force. Prince Shizong led a few million private armies to assist him. They started to seize the cities and took over several major cities. The two major powers couldn't resist even if they joined forces. The morale of the army was raised by dozens of times. The soldiers of the southern war zone who originally didn't have the heart to fight were now filled with fighting spirit. Some generals started to take the initiative to attack. Although the casualties were heavy, the glory it brought was also great. While Yen Ao led the army to seize the cities, he also helped the southern war zone to train the soldiers to increase their combat strength. Every army had to participate in the training for half a year, including the private armies. Yen Ao led the southern war zone for 7 to 8 years and seized back most of the cities. However, before they could reclaim all the cities, the sovereign immortal empire's army actually took the initiative to retreat to the southernmost region. The moment the sovereign immortal empire's army retreated, the people of the ultimate peak mountain also retreated. The southern war zone instantly stabilized. Yen Ao didn't feel that the sovereign immortal empire was afraid of him. There must be some other reason. Maybe it was because the other war zones were in a critical situation. Order all the commanders to fortify the cities at the borders. After that, prepare to participate in the training. No army is allowed to rashly attack the sovereign immortal empire and the ultimate peak mountain. Although the southern war zone had won, after so many battles, he could see that the private army was more powerful than the regular army. The decaying regular army lacked the fighting spirit and the killing intent that an army should have. It was not the fault of Emperor Tai Hao that he was old, it was just that these troops were too weak to be trained. It had been peaceful for too long. With the immortal emperor still around, there were basically no wars. Therefore, the regular army was incomparably lazy. Without the will to fight, how could they fight? After the south stabilized, Yen Ao started to train the army cruelly. In the Paragon Immortal Empire, after the army left the Qingzuan Immortal Empire, they rushed towards the south. In the southernmost region of the undying immortal world, an army swept through more than 10 cities in a row. The primordial god clan's Lien family was swept away, their ancestral artifact, bloodline source, and inherited secret arts were all taken away. Only the primordial godhead was not taken away because it was hidden well. However, other than the eldest disciple of the Lien family, everyone else was killed, and the godhead disappeared. The Taijiang divine race's army of close to 1 million was invincible. They attacked the cities but didn't occupy them. After killing the primordial god clan's members, they immediately changed their target and killed their way to the other ancient races. The people of the sovereign immortal empire were in a state of panic. They didn't know the purpose of the Taijiang divine race. Anyone could be annihilated. A large number of people from the major clans and primordial races felt their hair standing on end. They quickly sought help from the sovereign immortal empire. A large number of soldiers surrounded the Taijiang divine race. However, they couldn't withstand the charge of this terrifying army. After all, the people under the control of the Taijiang divine race were too strong. In addition, the army was too weak in front of them. The high priest of the Taijiang divine race occupied a high platform, looking down at the masses. There were many red marks on the map in his hand. These were the locations of primordial inheritances. There were primordial immortal and primordial god clans. There were 1,008 primordial god clans in the primordial era. They represented the control of various elements. The 6 main god clans were all experts at the level of primordial immortal emperors. For example, the Undying Immortal Emperor was much stronger than the current Undying Immortal Emperor. The remaining god clans were all subordinate god clans of the main god clans. However, their combat strength was also extremely strong. The Taijiang divine race was one of the strongest clans under the main god clans. Their ancestor was a divine general, and their combat strength was only second to the main god clans. Their clan was constantly thinking of ways to improve their bloodline and become the main god clans. This was also one of their goals this time. The next battle is against the Ling clan, a subordinate god of the primordial god clans. They control the profundity of time delay. Don't give them time to prepare. We have to break their defense as soon as possible. The Taijiang divine race waved their flag and marched towards the northeast of the sovereign immortal empire. In just 10 days, they encountered 3 armies that were all swept away by them. The Taijiang divine race's army grew larger and larger. Many of the soldiers were controlled. Although their combat strength wasn't much, they lost their autonomy after being controlled. They were no longer afraid of death and became cannon fodder. The current situation shook the entire sovereign immortal empire. All the clans with primordial god bloodlines started to work together, preparing to launch a counterattack against the Taijiang divine race. More than 10 clans with primordial god bloodlines and ancient immortal clans gathered in the capital of the sovereign immortal empire. They were searching for a way to counter the Taijiang divine runes. Unfortunately, there was nothing they could do. The bloodlines of the 6 main god clans had already disappeared. The 6 main god divine cores were also missing. No one dared to enter the ancient battlefield to look for them. Let's work together and form an army to fight against the Taijiang divine race. The Ling clan was already very close to the Taijiang divine race's army. The situation was extremely dangerous. Clan head Lingjin anxiously said. The other clans also agreed. If they didn't work together now, they would be devoured by the Taijiang divine race one by one. The army quickly formed an alliance. Unfortunately, before they could move out, the Ling clan was uprooted. Other than Ling Zhen, no one else was left alive. The Taijiang divine race was too cruel. It was as though they would only be satisfied after exterminating all the clans. Yan Ao, who was far away in the southern part of the Qingzun Immortal Empire, also received the news. He couldn't help but loathe the Taijiang divine race. It was a sense of crisis that came from the bottom of his heart. A race like this would do anything for strength. The sovereign immortal empire wouldn't be able to stop them. Sooner or later, they would slaughter their way to the Qingzun Immortal Empire. In the main camp, Emperor Taihao, Yan Ao, Xinyuan Tai and the other big shots were gathered together. Emperor Taihao was the oldest among them. He also had the most understanding of the Taijiang divine race. At the mention of the Taijiang divine race, his face was filled with worry. During the primordial era, the Taijiang divine general's strength was 30% stronger than the current immortal emperor. His character was extremely cruel, and he enslaved experts from all over the world. Unfortunately, the space master god protected him, so no one dared to say anything. If it wasn't for the Taijiang divine general falling during the primordial war, I'm afraid this person would have surpassed the immortal emperor. Emperor Taihao said in a heavy voice. Yan Ao was inexplicably irritated. When the Taijiang divine race was mentioned, he had the urge to exterminate them. This thought came from nowhere. Emperor, this Taijiang divine rune is so terrifying. Is there any way to control it? Yan Ao asked in a heavy voice. Emperor Taihao nodded and said in a low voice, there is. If an expert with the godhead of the 6 overgod clans appeared, he would be able to control the Taijiang divine rune. Unfortunately, the 6 overgod clans have gone missing. The inheritance of the 6 overgod clans has also been severed. Xianyuan Tai raised his brows and asked in return, doesn't this mean that as long as the immortal emperor doesn't appear, no one would be able to control the Taijiang divine rune? Emperor Taihao frowned. After a long time, he said in a heavy voice, there is one other race that can control it. That is the Yen clan. Moreover, they have to cultivate the human Tao. However, the Yen clan has already been exterminated. The human Tao has also disappeared. Chapter 2568. In the south, everyone was in a state of panic and fear. Far away in the northernmost sky-gazing peak, Yi Qinghan had been sitting in the Orion Tower for hundreds of years without moving. His eyes were focused on the operation of the universe and the changes of the stars. His entire being was immersed in the universe, fusing with the immortal world and the universe. His cultivation level was still the same, his combat power was still the same, but his temperament was different. Just as the Taijiang celestial race was sweeping across the land, plundering the ancient gods' bloodline and cultivation techniques, Yi Qinghan subconsciously opened his eyes and looked towards the south. Then, he looked towards the void again without any change in his expression. Meanwhile, in the courtyard under the stargazing tower, Green Lotus Sword Immortal had been meditating here for hundreds of years, studying the sect Returning Sword's immemorial sword art. She sat there like a sword, emitting a green light that pierced through the sky and connected with the stars. In her first life, she lost her mortal body for Yi Qinghan. In her second life, she was already a low-level Xian immortal. After hundreds of years of meditation, she officially stepped into the mid-level Xian immortal level. However, her combat power was definitely not at the mid-level Xian immortal level. Hua! Green Lotus Sword Immortal's fingertips moved slightly and the ancient abyss sword beside her moved, wanting to be unsheathed. The sword chi shattered mountains and rivers, shaking 100,000 miles and alerting many of the inner sect's experts. The birth of the Sword Sovereign, sect Returning Swords. Xiao, all of the sword cultivators in the heaven-suppressing prefecture lost control of their swords and flew away, forming the sect Returning Swords aura as they rushed towards the sky-gazing peak. Yi Qinghan was also awakened. He looked down at Green Lotus Sword Immortal in the courtyard and nodded. Such pure sword chi, it has already surpassed my combat power. Yi Qinghan was not conceited. Green Lotus Sword Immortal was originally an expert in the way of the sword. She created the Green Lotus Sword Song and now, the sect Returning Swords was fused with the Green Lotus Sword Song and she improved it. The sect Returning Swords was originally one of the 10 profound immemorial sword arts. It was of such a high level that it could be improved. One had to admit that Green Lotus Sword Immortal's attainment in the way of the sword was terrifying. Green Lotus Sword Immortal slowly gripped the ancient abyss sword beside him and slowly stood up. His entire aura became extremely sharp. Even Yi Qinghan, who was wearing the marquee robe, felt the aura of death. She was tall and slender, and her green robes fluttered in the wind. Her aura was captivating. Her facial features were exquisite to the extreme. The transformation of a celestial medicine had a fatal attraction to people. Moreover, Green Lotus Sword Deity's appearance had already surpassed Xianyuan Lingjuan's. She was on par with the owner of the workshop, or even a head above her. It was just that her cultivation level was not as high as hers, so she appeared slightly weaker. Her skin was as white as snow and as smooth as water. Her pearl-like eyes gazed at the universe. Her thin lips parted slightly, revealing a row of white teeth. It was extremely moving. The Green Lotus Sword Immortal gracefully turned around and stepped into the boundless mist. She seemed like a true goddess. Her beautiful jet black hair scattered down and her slender figure was so tall that even her battle robes couldn't hide her impressive figure. She and Yi Qinghan looked at each other and smiled at the same time. Long time no see. Green Lotus Sword Immortal's heavenly voice was like a chant, making one's bones itch. See you every day. Yi Qinghan smiled slightly. He was in a high position and often lowered his head to look at Green Lotus Sword Immortal to soothe his agitated heart. Moreover, he was also afraid that something had happened to her during her cultivation. Green Lotus Sword Immortal felt a sweetness in her heart and an indescribable happiness. She slowly stepped onto the stargazing pavilion and stretched out her slender arms to wrap around Yi Qinghan's neck. Her fragrance was overwhelming and captivating. Dong dong dong, the two's heartbeats were clearly much faster. This feeling had been hidden in their hearts for countless years and wasn't something that time could erase. I'm glad that I didn't become your enemy back then. I'm glad too. The two whispered to each other. They couldn't imagine the consequences of becoming enemies with each other. It was very likely that Yi Qinghan would die, and it was also possible that Green Lotus Sword Immortal would die. However, it definitely wouldn't be the current situation. Green Lotus Sword Immortal lay on Yi Qinghan's back and asked crisply, "How's your comprehension going?" Yi Qinghan shook his head. If the number 1 divine ability under the primordial immortal emperors was so easy to cultivate, then the owner wouldn't have stayed in the stargazing pavilion for 30,000 years to comprehend. My overall combat prowess is still rising. However, this inverse space Milky Way diagram is extremely powerful. Once it is successfully cultivated, it will be able to defy the heavens and shatter the void. I still haven't been able to get a grasp of it, and it will take me a long time to fully deduce it. If you wish to gain some experience, you can head over to the Celestial Nation's 2 main battle zones to help out. The Dragon Carriage is right below Sky Gazing Peak. Yi Qinghan formed an imprint that was enough to control the Dragon Carriage. All right. I need to gain some practical experience so that I can step into the high levels of the mystic immortal realm. I won't disturb your comprehension any longer. After 30,000 years, I will properly entertain you. Green Lotus Sword Immortal blushed slightly and smiled sweetly, causing Yi Qinghan to almost lose control. However, they were in a critical period now. Yi Qinghan didn't dare to do it rashly. It was fine if they stopped for a short while, but if they stopped for too long, then these 100 years would be wasted. Asterisk Kakik. Asterisk, I didn't expect your self-control to be getting worse. Green Lotus Sword Immortal flew away and mocked him. Yi Qinghan smiled and looked at Green Lotus Sword Immortal's departing figure. His smile didn't fade. It seemed like he was really happy. Green Lotus Sword Immortal also smiled and stepped into the Dragon Carriage. Holding the imprint Yi Qinghan gave her, she rode the Dragon Carriage and went straight to the main battle zone. In the Spirit Central Battle Zone, the Chess Saint tried to attack the Northern Divine Region several times in an attempt to take down the Northern Divine Region. However, he failed, but his losses were much less than the revered dragon army. The Demon Ceiling Cave was located in a strategic location. It was easy to attack when there were only a few people, but it was difficult when there were too many of them. Moreover, the revered dragon army wasn't stupid. How could they let the Chess Saint take them down so easily? Big Boss Ling Yang and the revered Dragon Marquis also fought several times. Both sides suffered losses. Big Boss Ling Yang was slightly weaker, but it wasn't realistic for the revered Dragon Marquis to kill Big Boss Ling Yang. Outside the Demon Ceiling Cave, in the revered Dragon Marquis tent, a secret agent walked in and reported respectfully, "Marquis, something big has happened in the Northern Divine Region's royal hunting ground. A group of experts is wantonly plundering resources. From their attire, it seems like they are the remnants of the revered dragon army's king Wenzhong's army. There are about 1,000 of them. However, when the guards wanted to chase them away, they killed the guards." Asterisk bang. Boom. Asterisk the revered Dragon Marquis was furious and reprimanded, "Trash, why didn't you inform me about this earlier? Are the guards of the hunting ground dead? Didn't the nearby cities send their armies to capture them?" The secret agent was sweating profusely as he reported with a trembling voice. They were captured, but they failed. They are trying to break through the encirclement of Lord Zhang Fan's Jingfan army. After investigation, it's very likely that they are the Qingzun Immortal Empire's northern garrison army in disguise. The revered Dragon Marquis was enraged. He was just worried that he wouldn't be able to vent his anger. He roared, "No matter what price we have to pay, keep those 1,000 people here." The revered Dragon Marquis quickly walked out of the tent and ordered his deputy, "Men, inform Zhang Fan that we can't keep those people here. Tell him to come and see me himself." Chapter 2569. The Venerable Dragon Marquis was enraged. He was almost certain that the group was led by an expert from the eccentric sect. Otherwise, no one would be so bold as to go to the royal hunting area to plunder resources when the two countries were at war. "Yunkong, you will personally lead 3,000 Blood Dragon Guards and 1,000 Azure Dragon Guards to capture this army. Make sure Zhang Fan blocks their escape route." The Venerable Dragon Marquis stared at his deputy beside him. He was a high-leveled mystic immortal and a vanguard who was deeply trusted by the Venerable Dragon Marquis. Yunkong was 2 meters tall and burly. He looked like a loyal person who was suitable to be led. In fact, his adaptability was still lacking. Otherwise, he would have been crowned as a king. "Yes, sir." Yunkong bowed and said, "Go and come back quickly. Capture those 1,000 people alive and bring them to me. I want to see who is so bold. If they capture a few of the older generation from the eccentric sect, Yi Qinghan, I will make you regret it." Whoosh! Yunkong quickly assembled a special force of 4,000 people, the Blood Dragon Guards and Azure Dragon Guards. These 4,000 people could be used as 40,000 regular soldiers. Capturing 1,000 people would be a piece of cake. At this moment, Paragon Ye's face was flushed red. This time, they had really earned quite a lot. Everyone's celestial rings were almost full. If they had not been exposed, they would probably have been able to steal all the resources in the royal hunting area. Let's go, let's go. These bastards will definitely stop us in the northern battlefront. We'll take a detour and go through the northern divine region battlefront. Supreme Yi said loudly. Hua Lingtian looked up at Supreme Yi on his shoulder and asked with a doubtful expression, "Are you an idiot? There are armies everywhere. Aren't you looking for death by going deep into the battlefront?" Smith, "I really want to bury you alive. Are you calling me an idiot? Haven't you heard of this saying? The more dangerous the place, the safer it is. I don't think they would expect me to bring 1,000 people into the battlefront." Supreme Yi said proudly. "But what if we run into an army?" Hua Lingtian asked helplessly. Supreme Yi rolled his eyes and looked at him as if he was an idiot. "How did you cultivate to the top 20 of the Heaven leaderboard? If you don't run when you run into an army, are you going to surrender? 1,000 of us are suitable for trekking through dangerous mountainous terrain. Can the army do it?" Hua Lingtian was ranked in the top 20 of the Heaven leaderboard and was a high-level mystic immortal. However, he had been scolded by Supremacy Yi all the way until his scalp went numb. He was scolded when he came, and he was scolded when he returned. At this point he was already used to it. All right. Stop cursing. Let's go to the depths of the battle zone and then take the mountain path back to the Spirit Central Battle Zone. Hua Lingtian held the Fangtian halberd in his hand and carried Supremacy Yi on his back as he led the 1,000-man team towards the northern Divine Region's mountain range. The mountain range was covered in a vast expanse of mist and dense fog. It was not suitable for marching at all. Moreover, there were a large number of vicious creatures, making it extremely dangerous. Supreme Yi could not block the attacks of the enemy army, but he had a way to block these ancient monsters. Therefore, he chose to enter the depths of this endless mountain range. The army held hands with each other and formed 10 small teams. Supreme Martial Artist Yi and Hua Lingtian separated. "You take the lead and I'll guard the rear. 1,000 of us came, so 1,000 of us have to go back." Supreme Martial Artist Ye's expression was solemn. He was just like Yi Qinghan, protective of his own people. He could only take advantage of others and not suffer losses. If anyone made him suffer losses, he would make them pay back tenfold. The 1,000-man team was extremely touched. A soldier would die for his friend. With a good general, how could the soldiers not be fearless of death? The 1,000-man team did not speak. They just kept moving forward. A void cloud led the 4,000 Azure Dragon Guards and Blood Dragon Guards and moved quickly. Information was sent over. They found out that the 1,000-man team did not move towards the northern region. Instead, they went to the battle zone. They could only change their direction and move towards the mountain range. The mountain range was not suitable for marching at all. It was difficult even for a few hundred people, let alone 4,000. However, Void Cloud and the others were extremely fast. They were following orders. They had to capture this team. If they did not, they would die. If they did, they could accept some losses. Deep in the mountain range, an ancient beast roared. It was deafening and made one's scalp tingle. Screech, the ferocious bird soared into the sky. Its red eyes stared at the moving army. It seemed to have smelled blood. Defend the sky. Be careful of high-level birds, Void Cloud reminded in a deep voice. In fact, those who could join the Blood Dragon Guards and Azure Dragon Guards were all top-notch in the army. At this moment, they were all very careful. Time passed quickly. The team led by Void Cloud quickly approached Venerable Yi. From time to time, ferocious birds swooped down from the sky and slid past the team. They stirred up gusts of wind, making one's hair stand on end. Those high-level ferocious birds were all ancient races. Their sharp claws could tear apart the defense of the Azure Dragon Guards. Once captured by these ferocious birds, there was absolutely no hope of survival. Huge, ferocious creatures stood on top of the mountains. They looked down at the team from above. Roar! A few experts who rode secondary dragons intimidated the ancient ferocious creatures. Unfortunately, they were all ancient ferocious creatures. They did not care about the dragon might of these secondary dragons at all. Instead, it aroused their appetite. Damn it. If we take the secondary dragons into our bloodlines, they won't be able to intimidate these ferocious ancient ferocious creatures. Instead, they will covet the blood of the secondary dragons, Void Cloud said immediately. The Azure Dragon Guards quickly took away the secondary dragons. However, more and more ferocious creatures gathered, and their speed gradually slowed down. On the contrary, Supreme Yi unleashed the might of the primordial immortal phoenix. No ferocious creatures dared to approach them. They moved faster and faster, gradually leaving Void Cloud's army behind. Supreme Yi held the map and discovered that some areas in the depths of the mountain range were natural danger zones. They were also natural barriers between the two immortal kingdoms. Only a few areas could be entered into the Qingzuan Immortal Kingdom. Continue to go deeper and get closer to the main battle area, Supreme Yi ordered loudly. Huoling Tian pursed his lips. He no longer dared to refute because he knew that he would be scolded if he did. Moreover, it would not change the fact. He could only grit his teeth and lead the 1,000-man team toward the main battle area. After traveling for more than a year in the northern Divine Region mountain range, they found many treasures. Supreme Yi did not stand on ceremony and took them all. Moreover, he used the immortal phoenix to subdue many ferocious birds. He began to mobilize the birds toward the Qingzuan Immortal Kingdom in the west. There were many places that humans could not go. Mystic immortals could not fly, but birds could. Void Cloud chased for more than a year. Not only did they not catch up to Supreme Ye's army, but they also lost them. They were completely lost in the northern Divine Region mountain range and lost hundreds of people. All of them were killed by the sneak attacks of the ancient ferocious birds and ferocious beasts. Damn it! Why can't we keep up with the information? Where am I supposed to find these 1,000 people in the mountain range? Void Cloud roared. The army was also furious. The losses this time were too great. They were actually left behind by 1,000 enemies in their own territory. The revered Dragon Marquis would probably be furious and kill one to warn the others to establish their military might. At this time, Supreme Yi had already led the 1,000-man team to the border. However, there was a large army gathered there. They were all from the revered Dragon Army. If they went there now, they would die. Supreme Yi led the 1,000-man team to hide behind the army and looked at the front of the battle area. He said in a low voice, "You guys will follow me to the main battle area later. Listen to my orders and pretend to attack the Spirit Central battle area. We will be able to live if we just bluff our way through. Don't give yourself away and ruin my plan." Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Supreme Yi's small hand slid down and returned to his original form. He landed on Hua Lingtian's shoulder and led the 1,000-man team to the battlefield arrogantly. It was as if they were from the revered dragon army. They were not afraid of being discovered at all. "Hurry up and follow me. What's the point of dilly-dallying?" Hua Lingtian shouted loudly at the 1,000-man team, purposely attracting the attention of others. Many people took a glance and turned their heads away. Who would have thought that Supreme Yi would lead an army to their army? Chapter 2570. Hua Lingtian swaggered through the army camp with 1,000 men, cursing and swearing along the way. "You guys are the special forces specially approved by Master Ho. Do you think I won't dig a hole and bury all of you in it?" Hua Lingtian looked majestic. He was wearing a captain's uniform. Normal people wouldn't dare to question him. "The Marquis specially ordered to attack the enemy's army tonight. All of you better be alert. Otherwise, if the mission fails, I won't be the one burying you." Hua Lingtian was wearing the military armor, which covered most of his face. At this moment, a middle-aged major walked over. Not only did he not know Hua Lingtian, he also did not know when the Marquis formed this special force. He also did not know about tonight's attack on the enemy's camp. Hence, he wanted to know more. "How should I address this commander? Which unit are you from?" The middle-aged man saluted and asked curiously. Hua Lingtian stared and said coldly, "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. How did you become a major? Do you need me to teach you the rules of military operations again?" The middle-aged major sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at Hua Lingtian in shock. He did not know how to respond to Hua Lingtian. Seeing how domineering Hua Lingtian was, he suspected that Hua Lingtian's identity was high. He was only a major and was only in charge of the defense of this area. If he was capable, he would have been in charge of the main attack. "I am under the orders of the Marquis to lead this group of death soldiers to the Qingzun Immortal Empire to attack the enemy's army. We will attract the enemy's main force and buy time for the Marquis to attack the Ling Central City. You guys are in charge of supporting us. Do you understand?" Hua Lingtian said domineeringly. In terms of cultivation, Hua Lingtian was in the top 20 of the heaven list. He was definitely not weak. His aura was also much more domineering than the average high-level cultivator. Speaking to a major with such an attitude, the major did not dare to say anything. Yes. "May I know which Marquis you are under? Do you have a warrant?" The major asked respectfully. Hua Lingtian looked at him coldly and said, "It's Lord Marquis Lang Xie of the Northern Divine Region. This order is a password. I am the nephew of Marquis Lang Xie. Don't you know me? You are asking for a warrant? You really don't know how to conduct yourself. No wonder you can only guard this border without any profits." The captain immediately nodded and bowed. "So it's young Marshal Lang Xie. This humble one lacks manpower in the army and doesn't know how to conduct himself. However, I'm loyal enough. I wonder if young Marshal Lang Xie lacks someone to serve at your beck and call? This humble one is willing to serve you." Hua Lingtian had been enlightened by Venerable Ye's teachings during this period of time. He was able to speak the language of a human and the language of a ghost. He immediately put on an act and rubbed his chin as he sized Yiqing up. He pretended to be deep in thought as he said, Not bad, not bad. Your cultivation is not bad. I'll talk to my uncle some other day and transfer you over to follow me. However, you have to be smart." Yes. "You're right, young Marshal," Xia Tianke quickly replied. Hua Lingtian said calmly, "Then let me test you. As the nephew of the Marquis, why would I carry out such a dangerous mission?" Xia Tianke was taken aback. He hadn't thought of this before. Now that he was asked this question, it seemed that there were indeed some problems. However, he didn't dare to speak carelessly and could only say, "Young Marshal, I don't know. Please give me some pointers." "Gilding. Idiot," Such an easy mission may seem dangerous, but when you actually carry it out, it's pure chaos. It's easy without any danger. Let them increase the number of guards, dilute the main army, and reduce the pressure on the marquee revered dragon. I'll be credited with a great contribution. With outstanding military achievements, my path of promotion will be much faster. That's why I said you have to learn to be smarter. Be more open-minded and don't be so rigid. If you want to follow me, I'll have to teach you some survival skills, Huoling Tian said in a serious manner. Xiaohe felt as if he was struck by lightning when he heard this. He immediately said gratefully, "Thank you for your pointers, young marshal. I'll definitely do my best." All right. We'll talk about it when I come back with meritorious service. You guys have to be prepared to receive me, Huoling Tian said calmly. After saying that, Huoling Tian immediately led the 1,000-man team and charged towards the border with his head held high. With the captain leading the way, the army quickly opened up a path. The 1,000-man team sped up. Huoling Tian didn't dare to say anything else. They quickly moved forward and entered the border between the two empires. About a few thousand meters away from the border, there was the Qingzun Immortal Empire's army stationed there. It was also a 10,000-man team. The military rules were strict, completely unlike Xia Tiang's army. The sky had already darkened. The 1,000-man team retracted their aura and crawled forward. Their bodies were covered with branches and thorns. The 1,000-man team crawled to the other side, but they didn't dare to reveal their identities. They were afraid that a wave of arrows would rain down on them and half of them would die here. Crawl towards the north. There's a valley there. There are fewer people there, Huoling Tian said softly. He was quite familiar with this place. 1,000 mystic immortals crawling was a rare sight. Probably only Sovereign Ye's private army could do something like this. However, these 1,000-man team were already used to crawling. Sovereign Yi was shameless, so they couldn't do anything even if they wanted to. Along the way they crawled through thorns and weeds. Some poisonous thorns directly pierced through their armor, causing them to grimace in pain. However, no one dared to make a sound. Take off your armor and change into our own clothes. Sovereign Yi transformed into a human and said excitedly. What? The army quickly took off the clothes of King Zhongwang's army and changed into the clothes of the northern town's private army. Sovereign Yi even put on his marquee robe. The 1,000-man team moved quickly and rushed into the hinterland. However, before they could rejoice, they were surrounded by an army. There were 30,000 crossbowmen. All of them had arrows on their bows. The arrows were covered with sharp immortal killing marks. They could definitely severely injure or even kill mystic immortal experts. Everyone's hair stood on end. Sovereign Yi immediately raised the little white flag. He had prepared this thing long ago. I'm Sovereign Yi of the northern town. Sovereign Yi waved the little white flag and roared. We're the private army of the northern town. We obtained resources from the enemy's rear. Don't shoot. Huoling Tian was also anxious. He immediately waved the flag and said. The army surrounding the 1,000-man team obviously didn't believe him. The leader said in a deep voice, "Put down your weapons and lie on the ground in a row. Whoever dares to make a move will be killed without mercy." Lie down, lie down. Sovereign Yi didn't care about his marquee robe at all. He immediately covered his head with both hands and lay on the ground. No one in the 1,000-man team acted recklessly. They all lay down. The army rushed up with a whoosh and directly sealed everyone's chi and blood. They tied them up. You don't recognize me, but you should recognize the marquee robe on me. How dare you tie me up? Do you believe that I'll dig a hole and bury all of you? Sovereign Yi roared in dissatisfaction. The commander of the army took a closer look and realized that it was really Sovereign Yi. He immediately got off his horse and stepped forward. So it's Lord Sovereign Yi. I didn't know. Please forgive me. Forgive my ass. Let us go. Sovereign Yi roared in dissatisfaction. Chapter 2571. Supremacy Yi was furious. This was the first time he was tied up like this, and it was by his own people. The commander of the army immediately untied the immortal binding chains on Supremacy Yi and signaled for the others to release the other teams. Supremacy Yi curled his lips. He had a large amount of resources on him and didn't want to stay here for long. He was afraid that the other party would chase after him, so he said, "You guys guard the border. I suspect that they will try to force their way here. You guys wait for them, no matter how many come, kill them all." "Lord Supremacy, are you sure they will try to kill their way here?" Du Shuai asked excitedly. If they really tried to kill their way here, it would be a great contribution. Supremacy Yi didn't care if the other party would try to kill him, but for his own safety, he said with certainty, "They will definitely try to kill their way here. You guys block them for me. I will return to the northern district first. I will tell Yen Ao about your contribution." "Many thanks, Lord Supremacy. Please go ahead. Bailuan will cover your retreat." Du Shuai Bailuan, who was leading the army, was currently bowing and fawning. In order to make Supremacy Yi believe him, he waved his hand and said to his subordinates, "Follow this commander and cover Lord Supremacy's retreat." What? The archer army quickly rushed to the border, choosing a strategic place to hide. Void Cloud rushed to the border in a sorry state. When he found out that Supremacy Yi had sneaked into the Qingzun Immortal Empire, he was so angry that he wanted to kill Xia Tianke. Xia Tiang's face was pale. He didn't expect that he would personally send away the person that Marquis Zun Long wanted to capture. But Void Cloud gave him a slap and scolded, "You're not Xia Tianke. You lack nothing but your brain. Is 1,000 people enough to attack the border? This lowly one doesn't know. Please forgive this lowly one." Xia Tianke said in fear, "As long as Lord Supremacy protects this lowly one's life, I will follow your lead in the future. I won't dare to go against you at all. Bring your men and follow me. Kill our way into the enemy's territory and stop them in advance." Void Cloud roared. "Yes." Xia Tianke didn't dare to refute. If he couldn't stop Supremacy Yi and the others, he would definitely die. "Hua! Follow me." Void Cloud led less than 4,000 Azure Dragon Guards and Blood Dragon Guards as well as over 10,000 Border Guards to kill their way into the Azure Zun Immortal Empire. But as soon as he entered the border, he felt that something was wrong. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Tens of thousands of arrows rained down. The sharp crossbow bolts carried immortal killing runes as they pierced through the void, covering more than 10,000 soldiers. Bailuan held a huge bow in his hand and drew the bowstring fully. A sharp arrow tore through mountains and rivers, piercing through 10-odd corpses of the Blood Dragon Guards. Blood dyed the ground. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Wave after wave of arrows rained down in the blink of an eye, as if they had been waiting for this. "Retreat!" Void Cloud broke several crossbow bolts and ordered the army to retreat. Unfortunately, there was no time. They had already entered the encirclement. After more than 10 waves of arrow rain, Xia Tianke's 10,000-odd soldiers were completely wiped out. The Azure Dragon Guards and Blood Dragon Guards were almost completely wiped out. Only 1,000-odd people remained. Void Cloud was furious and cursed, "Son of a bitch, who betrayed me?" Bailuan, on the other hand, was incomparably excited. After getting rid of this group of people, he could become the commander of 100,000 soldiers. His official position would instantly rise by 1 rank. Capture the enemy's leader alive. Leave none of the others alive. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Tens of thousands of archers mobilized all their strength and shot out all the crossbow bolts in their hands. Each person had at least a dozen crossbow bolts stuck in their body. A moment later, only 300 Azure Dragon Guards were left, and all of them were heavily injured. "Kill!" Bailuan put away his huge bow and took the lead. He held a long spear in his hand and charged toward Void Cloud. The 30,000 archers could attack from a far or close range. 30,000 people against 300 injured Azure Dragon Guards. Wasn't it easy? Void Cloud was in despair. If he didn't escape now, he might not even be able to escape. In the end, he could only grit his teeth and give up on the 300 injured Azure Dragon Guards, escaping the encirclement alone. Bailuan chased closely behind. In the end, he chased him to the border. He didn't dare to go too deep and could only retreat regretfully. Lord Supreme really didn't lie to me. He gave me such a great merit, huh? After Bai Luan's regret, he was wild with joy. He returned to the battle zone and killed all 300 Azure Dragon Guards. He took the heads, the clothes of the Azure Dragon Guards and the Blood Dragon Guards, and the Immortal Ring. He went straight to the main battle zone to claim the merit. At this moment, Supreme Yi led the 1,000-man army and charged toward the northern district. He was arrogant and domineering along the way. He was extremely smug. The resources we brought this time are enough for the army to use for a few hundred years. I wonder if that bastard revered dragon will vomit blood and die from anger when he finds out that I took away half of the resources of the Imperial hunting ground? Supreme Yi laughed loudly. Hualing Tian and the others were already full of admiration for Supreme Yi. After so many years in the enemy's rear, he had never miscalculated. Lord Supreme is wise. If we follow you, our future will be limitless. Hualing Tian smiled flatteringly. Supreme Yi raised his head proudly and patted Hualing Tian's head. You're finally enlightened. In the future, follow me and live a good life. It won't be difficult for you to become a marquis. In the face of Supreme Yi's arrogance, not only did they not think that it was a fantasy, but they were also looking forward to it. A few months later, Supreme Yi led the 1,000-man army into the northern district. At this time, Void Cloud fled back to the revered dragon army in a sorry state. The revered dragon marquis looked at Void Cloud, who was covered in blood. His face was ashen and his 5 fingers pierced through the stone table. 4,000 Blood Dragon Guards and Azure Dragon Guards couldn't stop 1,000 men? Don't tell me you met Yanao. The revered dragon marquis looked at Void Cloud and questioned coldly. Void Cloud swallowed a mouthful of saliva. If he met Yanao, at least he wouldn't lose. However, this time, he didn't even see the face of the enemy and was wiped out by the archer army. And no, Marquis. I didn't catch up to the 1,000 men. Void Cloud knelt in front of the revered dragon marquis and said with his head lowered. The revered dragon marquis almost went crazy when he heard that. He asked angrily, since you didn't meet the enemy, how did your 4,000 men die? How did you get injured? Void Cloud panicked and hurriedly explained. It was Xia Tianke from the Yu Mountain Guards in the north who sent the 1,000 men out of the border. I was unwilling to give up, so I led the guards to attack the other side. In the end, the other side seemed to know that I was going to chase after them, so they arranged an army of 30,000 archers at the border. We broke into the encirclement, but I couldn't bring my men out of the encirclement. The revered dragon marquis blood rushed to his head and he almost fell to the ground. He held his forehead as his head hurt. He asked in a hoarse voice, then you should have found out who led the 1,000 men, right? Void Cloud immediately said with certainty, it was Yi Qinghan's spiritual pet, Supreme Yi. Xia Tianke mentioned that there was a powerhouse with a white parrot on his shoulder. His eyes were shifty. It must be that Supreme Yi. The revered dragon marquis was furious. He smashed the stone table with his palm and shouted, it's him again. If I don't chop him into pieces, then I'm not a revered dragon. Void Cloud didn't dare to say more. Staying silent was the best choice. Huff, the revered dragon marquis took a few breaths. He was so angry that he couldn't control his emotions. I'll give you a chance to make up for your mistakes. Let 1,000,000 men and ask Zhang Fan to cooperate with you to take down the northern city. If you don't succeed, I'll see you with my head. The revered dragon marquis said coldly. Chapter 2572. In the northern district, Sovereign Yi led 1,000 people into the city. They all had several immortal rings on them, and they were almost all full. The resources they had obtained this time were far more than what Di Longtian had obtained from killing the Azure Dragon Guards. As soon as they entered the northern region, Supremacy Yi ordered people to gather all the resources and distribute them to the soldiers. Yi Tian and Stan Wuxie were dumbfounded when they saw the large amount of resources. They couldn't help but admire this divine bird. However, before Supremacy Yi could get excited, Lu Outyan walked out of the northern region's inner palace hall with a stern face. Supremacy Yi, As the commander of the army, you left your post without permission. That's against the military rules. Do you think the lives of the army are like ants? Lu Aotian reprimanded angrily. Supremacy Yi was originally very guilty. After all, he had left the northern region for so long. If something happened, he would have to bear a lot of responsibility. However, when he saw Lu Aotian's questioning, his eyes flashed. He put his hands on his hips and retorted loudly, "You're the commander of the army and you still have the nerve to scold me. The Northern Region Army doesn't have any pay. If you don't give it to me, do I have to rely on myself to get resources and pay? I risked my life to fight for everyone's benefits. How dare you scold me? You even want to punish me with military rules. Don't you feel ashamed?" Lu Aotian's eyelids twitched. He only questioned him once, but he was questioned back several times. He opened his mouth several times to refute, but he couldn't find a suitable reason. Besides, didn't I ask Yi Chen-tian and Stan Wuxia to stay here to guard the northern region? Do you think that boss's son and disciple are idiots who can't guard a city? Supremacy Yi asked righteously and angrily. Lu Aotian was speechless. Also, you're the commander. Where's my pay? If you don't give me pay, what right do you have to manage my army? Is it wrong for me to rely on myself? Supremacy Yi was unforgiving. He continued to question him, leaving Lu Aotian speechless. After a long while, Lu Aotian took a few deep breaths and pointed at Supremacy Yi. "Stupid bird, you're asking for a beating. It's boss's idea to not give you pay. If you have the ability, go find boss. What's the point of looking for me? It's your fault for leaving your post without permission, but now it's all my fault." Supreme Yi raised his head proudly and said disdainfully, "Tee, then boss said that I'll be in charge of the northern district. If you want to punish me, it's boring to look for boss. What's the use of looking for me? I left my post for the sake of the army's pay. According to what you're saying, it's my fault?" The same words were returned to Lu Aotian. Lu Aotian was completely speechless. Fine. You're right." Chapter 2573. Supremacy Yi sat on the city wall with a wretched expression as his eyes shone with a cunning light. How can I trick Zhang Fan, that old man, away? Supremacy Yi racked his brains. It was impossible to trick a big shot without putting in some effort. However, in his opinion, there was no one in this world that he could not trick. Even if there was, all he needed to do was to trick them a few more times. Lu Aotian pouted. He did not believe that Supremacy Yi could trick Zhang Fan out of the war zone. Clap. Supremacy Yi clapped his hands and stood up immediately. "Let's see what happens when we meet Zhang Fan." Whoosh! Supremacy Yi leaped and rushed towards the eastern border from the towering city wall. Lu Aotian looked at Supremacy Yi's disappearing silhouette and could not help but grumble, "This retard is always dreaming. Damn it, he's lucky every time." At the border, Supremacy Yi walked towards Jing Fan's army camp with a little white flag in his hand. He looked extremely wretched. "I want to see Commander Zhang Fan. Please inform him." Supremacy Yi waved the little white flag and shouted. It was the first time they saw the commander of the enemy running into the enemy's army with the little white flag. Jing Fan's army was stunned. Is this guy's head kicked by a donkey? He's the commander of the Northern Garrison Army. Damn it, God is so unfair to let this retard lead the army. Is there no one else in the heaven-suppressing palace? The army discussed. Although their voices were not loud, their opinions were unanimous and their discussions spread far and wide. Supremacy Yi's face was as thick as the city wall. He pretended not to hear anything and looked at the enemy army wretchedly. Fortunately, no one attacked him. Brothers, please don't do anything. We're allies. Supremacy Yi said flatteringly. The two armies were already at a stalemate. Allies? But soon, a messenger quickly informed Zhang Fan. Zhang Fan woke up from his meditation. Knowing that Supremacy Yi wanted to see him, he stood up and stepped out of the tent. He looked at Supremacy Yi's wretched expression and actions and could not help but chuckle. The heaven-suppressing Marquis has such a weird spirit pet. What a sin. Zhang Fan shook his head and said softly, Supremacy Yi, come here. When Supreme Yi heard this, he immediately stood up straight and charged towards the army with a whoosh. My lord, you've finally shown yourself. Supreme Sovereign Yi rushed toward Zhang Fan in ecstasy. Zhang Fan waved his hand and swept away Supreme Exalt Yi, and he brought him into the tent before casually tossing him aside. Speak. Why are you looking for me? Zhang Fan asked indifferently. Supreme Yi looked around. The inside of the tent was very simple and crude. He reckoned that only the big shots could endure such a boring environment. Sir, my boss wants to see you. Honorable Yi said with a smile. Zhang Fan glanced coldly at Supremacy Yi and said disdainfully, Are you trying to scare me? Even if Yi Qinghan wanted to see me, he wouldn't send an unreliable person like you. A big shot is a big shot indeed. Your eyes are as sharp as pearls. You can tell at a glance, Supreme Martial Artist Yi said with a flattering smile. Zhang Fan snorted. It was a disgrace to communicate with a person like Supreme Martial Artist Yi, so he said directly, If you have something to say, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. Supreme Martial Artist Yi rubbed his hands and said with an embarrassed smile, I angered the Venerable Dragon Marquis some time ago. He'll probably send someone to attack the northern region and ask for your cooperation. We're allies. Boss repeatedly asked not to have a conflict with you. I'm here to discuss it with you. If you don't leave the war zone, you'll either offend the Venerable Dragon Marquis or fight with us. You know that if we fight, both sides will suffer. Moreover, it's exactly what the Venerable Dragon Marquis wants, so I'm here to inform you in advance and see if I can trick you into leaving the war zone. As long as you're not here, order the Jing Fan army not to move without permission. This way, even if the Venerable Dragon Marquis sends someone, he won't be able to find the person, and he won't be able to order the Jing Fan army. There won't be a conflict between us. Zhang Fan stared at Supreme Martial Artist Yi and asked in disdain, You're in the northern region, and he's in the main war zone. You're not even close. How did you offend him again? Supreme Martial Artist Yi said with an embarrassed smile, Wasn't there a team that entered the northern divine region's royal hunting area and took away half of the resources? It was my team. We might have even killed a few thousand of his Azure Dragon Guards and Blood Dragon Guards. How could he not be angry? Zhang Fan looked at Supreme Martial Artist Yi speechlessly. He opened his mouth to say something, but he did not know what to say. So you were the one who led that team. You've got guts. Zhang Fan was silent for a while, then said in a muffled voice. Supreme Martial Artist Yi said with a flattering smile, Don't worry, my lord. I definitely didn't cause you any trouble. I took a detour through another area, so if there's a mistake, it's the guards of the other areas who have to bear the blame. Zhang Fan was silent. The Venerable Dragon Marquis was vengeful, and he liked to eliminate the root of the problem. Once he was angered, he would definitely choose to kill him directly. Supreme Martial Artist Yi seemed to know him very well. He could guess that the Venerable Dragon Marquis would order people to attack the northern region. If I stay here and don't cooperate with the Venerable Dragon Army's attack, I'll definitely give the Venerable Dragon Marquis something to talk about, Zhang Fan thought to himself. He was thinking about what to do next. If he attacked the northern region, the favor would turn into enmity, and the loss would outweigh the gain. Zhang Fan was not stupid. The Venerable Dragon Army was the Venerable Dragon Army, and Jingfan Mountain was Jingfan Mountain. They were two completely different things. If it were not for the royal family, Jingfan Mountain would definitely not be guarding this place. But if I leave the war zone, won't I be leaving millions of troops in the tiger's den? Zhang Fan was very hesitant. He did not know what to do. Supreme Martial Artist Yi stared at Zhang Fan expectantly. Why don't you find an excuse to leave first? Supreme Martial Artist Yi said with an embarrassed smile, You can come back after I've dealt with the Venerable Dragon Army. Zhang Fan looked at him in disdain and asked, What's in it for me? An archaic great divine ability. Or a third-stage golden immortal level primordial secret skill, I will definitely be able to get it for you. Supremacy Yi vowed solemnly. Zhang Fan said faintly, If I believe you, I'll be smashed in the head by a rock. I swear on my boss's fate that if I lie to you, I'll let my boss be alone for the rest of his life. Besides, I wouldn't dare to lie to you, Supreme Martial Artist Yi said as he patted his chest. Zhang Fan touched his forehead and sighed. Yi Qinghan has committed a sin by having a spirit pet like you. Your Excellency, you're wrong. This Supreme Martial Artist is loved by everyone. Most importantly, I'm smart enough and have great luck. I can bring prosperity to my lord. Supreme Martial Artist Yi said confidently. Forget it. No wonder you can anger the venerable Dragon Marquis. Anyone can be angered by someone like you. Zhang Fan touched his forehead and waved his hand. You can leave first. I'll think about it. Supreme Martial Artist Yi smiled awkwardly and squatted beside Zhang Fan's leg. He knocked on it a few times and said flatteringly, You must think about it carefully. I'll definitely be filial to you in the future. After saying that, Supreme Martial Artist Yi ran out of the tent with his head tucked in. He ran back with the little white flag on his back. Jing Fan's army laughed at him. They had never seen such a general before. He was too fucking wretched. Actually, Supreme Martial Artist Yi already understood Zhang Fan's thoughts. Since he did not want to be enemies, he would definitely find an excuse to leave. Otherwise, he would have taken the opportunity to capture him. Supreme Martial Artist Yi was overjoyed when he heard Zhang Fan's thoughts. He quickly rushed to the northern district, feeling proud of himself. Do you really think I'm wretched? Like an ugly little guy? I'm letting you guys judge me like that on purpose. When Big Boss Zhang Fan leaves, the general will definitely look down on me. When the time comes, I'll pass the message to the venerable dragon army. Chapter 2574. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. In Jing Fan's camp, Zhang Fan remained silent for a long time after Sovereign Yi left. Report. My lord, the revered Dragon Army's military advisor, Lord Fu Longwen, is the commander-in-chief, and Yun Kong is the vanguard. He is leading 1,000,000 revered Dragon Army soldiers and 100,000 Blood Dragon Guards toward the northern Divine Region's Tianyu Pass. Their target is this place, and they should arrive in 2 months, a spy reported respectfully in the tent. Zhang Fan nodded and waved his hand. You may leave now. Summon the Vice General, Qin Yang. The spy left respectfully, and after half an hour, a muscular man walked into the tent. His cultivation level was close to the peak of Xian immortal level, and the power of God worship in his body was so strong that it was almost uncontrollable. Qin Yang had the bloodline of an ancient god. He was a subordinate of the 5 elemental ancient god and was a god worshipper of the earth element. His strength was not in offense but defense. Greetings, my lord. Qin Yang bowed. Zhang Fan looked at Qin Yang and said solemnly, Qin Yang, I have some matters to attend to today and I will be away for a while. During this time, you will be in charge of the 1,000,000-strong army. Without my and the Mountain Lord's orders, no one is allowed to mobilize you and Jing Fan's army, especially not to attack the Northern Suppression Palace and Heaven Suppressing Prefecture. Understand? Yes, my lord. Qin Yang said respectfully. What? Zhang Fan slowly stood up and retracted his aura like an ordinary middle-aged man. His aura was so strong that Qin Yang did not dare to move. If anyone asks you where I went, just say you don't know. If they ask you when I will be back, just say you don't know. If they ask you to move the army to attack the Northern Suppression Palace, just say you don't have the commander's seal. Zhang Fan reminded. Yes, my lord. Qin Yang replied respectfully as if he only knew how to follow orders. What? Zhang Fan twisted the space and disappeared from the tent. When I return, I will give you some advice if you can become an ancient god worshipper. Qin Yang was overjoyed. He never thought that the boss who never liked to communicate would take the initiative to train him. Zhang Fan did not go anywhere else. Instead, he headed towards the Heaven Suppressing Palace. Along the way, he looked like an ordinary middle-aged man, elegant and graceful. He must have been a handsome man when he was young. Zhang Fan did not alert anyone as he wanted to see how strong the crazy palace's defense was. Whoosh! Zhang Fan's speed was unbelievably fast. He bypassed the bustling areas and quickly approached the heaven-suppressing prefecture city. His psyche expanded outwards while his aura was concealed, allowing him to discover everything but him. Whoosh! Chapter 2575. Zhang Fan was stunned for a moment before asking. After all, although the human Dao art was one of the strongest secret arts in the supreme ancient immortal realms, it had long been lost. Also, the Yen race was a forbidden race, so it was normal for the elders to know about it. But Yi Qinghan came from a small world, so how did he know about the human Dao art? Only now did Yi Qinghan know that he had misspoken. He couldn't help but smile awkwardly and replied, I found some clues in the Crying Ghost Mountain range. I thought many people didn't know about this cultivation technique anymore. Zhang Fan glanced at Yi Qinghan and didn't probe further. Some things, the less one knew, the better. Do you have any questions about cultivation that you want to ask me? Chaotic times have arrived, and if you don't reach the Elder Realm, no one will be able to protect you. It's the same for the Azure-venerated Immortal Empire. On the surface, only the Azure-venerated Immortal Empire is at war. But in a few hundred years or 1,000 years, the battles between the nobles will be out in the open. The ones who will decide life and death will be the experts at the 3rd level. If you don't enter the Elder Realm, you might as well enter the eyes of the 3rd level experts. Without the protection of the 3rd level experts, you will die without a doubt. Zhang Fan calmly reminded. Yi Qinghan clenched his fists. 1,000 years? It was impossible for him to enter the Elder Realm. The time was too short. It was impossible for him to successfully comprehend the reverse space Milky Way diagram in 1,000 years. How could he enter the Elder Realm? Senior, 1,000 years is too short. I need at least 10,000 years before I can stand shoulder to shoulder with the elders. I might not even be able to reach the Elder Realm. Yi Qinghan said in a low voice. 10,000 years was a very long time. Especially in chaotic times, no one dared to say that they could live to the next day. Only those at the 3rd level could decide life and death. The battle between nobles isn't something that you and I can decide. Death will suppress your potential. Do your best. If you really can't do it, you can escape to the ancient immortal world. That place is very dangerous. Other than the elders at the 3rd level and above, no one will go there. Maybe there is a chance of survival. Zhang Fan said pessimistically. Yi Qinghan nodded and looked at the empty sky. The Milky Way appeared again. Looking at the stars in the sky, he was filled with a sense of helplessness. The inverse space diagram of the Milky Way looked like a diagram of the Milky Way, but in fact, it contained the most difficult great Tao law of the universe. It was not so easy to control. I once had some understanding of the inverse space galaxy diagram. You have to understand what Tao is. It was connected to the countless specks of light, forming a beautiful constellation diagram. Yi Qinghan still hadn't connected with the source of Ravenous Wolf. Yi Qinghan wasn't in a hurry, and only slowly absorbed the astral energy of Ravenous Wolf to perfect his astral soul. There were spatial storms everywhere in the universe, and they could destroy the immortal soul of an eternal mystic immortal at any time. One had to admit that Yi Qinghan was really daring. Time flew by, and the small Ravenous Wolf star in Yi Qinghan's immortal soul gradually formed. The countless specks of light in the immortal soul formed a straight line that shot towards the small Ravenous Wolf star. The clear straight line was formed by the endless astral energy, and it surged into the depths of the immortal soul, perfecting the small Ravenous Wolf star. Far away in the stargazing pavilion, a star image appeared on Yi Qinghan's forehead. The bloodline in his body burned, strengthening his immortal soul. Hua! Above the stargazing pavilion, light shone as if a star had descended, radiating in all directions. The entire northern divine island was enveloped, and the dark night instantly became as bright as day. Zhang Fan waited silently. He didn't expect Yi Qinghan to improve so quickly. Time flew by, and a month passed in the blink of an eye. A small star system appeared outside Ravenous Wolf. That was Yi Qinghan's immortal soul. At this moment, the star system was a frame that established the connection between Yi Qinghan and Ravenous Wolf star. The source of Ravenous Wolf star finally reacted, and it emitted waves of energy, communicating with Yi Qinghan. Yi Qinghan quickly withdrew his immortal soul, and used the little Ravenous Wolf star in his sea of consciousness to communicate with Ravenous Wolf star in the depths of the universe, borrowing the energy of the star. Hua! Yi Qinghan tried to raise his hand, and it was as if he was lifting the entire star. His palm contained boundless energy. Boom, boom, boom. Hua, hua, hua. His qi and blood circulated, but the energy in his body was so little that it was almost negligible. Yi Qinghan's heart was unperturbed. Using Ravenous Wolf Star as a foundation, he began to understand the order of the subsidiary stars around him and the star system's order. Slowly, the order of the galaxy's operation was no longer so difficult to understand, nor was it so difficult to control. Month after month, time became a virtual concept. Yi Qinghan couldn't feel the passage of time at all. In his immortal soul, there was only the reversal of the galaxy, and a flip of his hand could shatter the sky. Zhang Fan exhaled a turbid breath. He could only guide Yi Qinghan through the door, but he could only rely on himself for the rest of his cultivation. However, as Yi Qinghan mobilized more and more stars, he couldn't lift his arm anymore. It's not like the North Suppression King is personally guarding it. I don't really care about it. However, attacking the Northern Fortress is the same as attacking the Heaven Suppressing Palace. Our forces alone are not enough. I hope Vice Commander Qinyang can stop the 300,000 ancient gods of slaughter from the Heaven Suppressing Palace for the sake of the bigger picture. Give me 3 days and I will take down the Northern Fortress. Qinyang shook his head and said calmly, I'm sorry. It's not that I don't want to help you, and it's not that I don't care about the bigger picture. It's just that the commander isn't here and I don't have the authority to mobilize the army. Although I want the credit, I don't dare to take it. Fu Longwen frowned and asked, May I know where Lord Zhang Fan went? Qinyang still shook his head. He didn't know anything and didn't mean what he said. He didn't want to help the revered dragon army at all. Although Jingfan Mansion and revered Dragon Marquis Mansion both belonged to the imperial family, they didn't have a good relationship. Fu Longwen glanced at Qinyang, and their eyes met. He then bowed and left Jingfan Army's main camp. As soon as he entered the revered dragon army's tent, Fu Longwen said calmly, Jingfan Palace doesn't want to help us. Rest for 3 days and attack directly. End the battle quickly and don't give them a chance to support us. Leave after we capture Supremacy Yi alive. At that moment, Supremacy Yi was lying on the city wall with his legs crossed. A spy quickly came forward and said wretchedly, Commander Supremacy, the army led by Sky Cloud has arrived. 1 million revered dragon army and 100,000 blood dragon guards. You're really good at predicting things. A wretched commander would definitely lead an army astray. It was obvious that the northern city's private army was wretched and fawning after being led by Supremacy Yi. They had learned about 70% to 80% of his shameless spirit. Their ability to fawn on him was getting better and better. Supreme Yi nodded and said as if it was a matter of fact, this marshal understands. Inform the city guards to dig a pit 10 miles outside the city. Hang a plaque on it and write Cloud Realm Army to be buried here. Commander Supremacy, how big of a hole should we dig? The spy asked fawningly. Supremacy Yi glanced at him and said, a small one is fine. Don't tire my subordinates out. However, the plaque must be big enough that it can be discovered at any time. This lowly one understands. Next time, Commander Supremacy, you must instruct your subordinates to do more meritorious deeds. This lowly one is willing to serve you like a dog or horse. The spy brought out 30% of Supremacy Yi's wretchedness and looked very wretched. Supremacy Yi was not annoyed by this kind of person. Instead, he admired him. Just as Supremacy Yi was thinking about how to kill Sky Cloud's army, Lu Outyin climbed up the city wall. It seemed that he had also received the news. They're here to settle the score with you. Do you have a good plan? Lu Outyin asked calmly. It's only 1 million people. Let me think of a way to dig a hole and bury them, Supremacy Yi said confidently. Lu Outyin pursed his lips and snorted, Only? Be careful that others don't pluck your bird head off. I've already killed 3 million of the Wenzhong army. Supremacy Yi said proudly. Lu Outyin directly interrupted him and said disdainfully, You didn't kill them. They were killed by the army led by Yan Ao. Supremacy Yi glanced at Lu Aotian. If it wasn't for the fact that he could use him, he would have fallen out with him. Papa. Supremacy Yi jumped off the city wall and patted his butt. He said, "Don't I still have more than 300,000 captives? I'll go and see how the training is going." The captives were all reorganized into a formation and were mining in the northern district. In Supremacy Ye's opinion, since they had surrendered, there was no one who was not afraid of death. It was not a problem to train them into a private army. The huge mining area was filled with the Wenzhong army that had surrendered. At this time, they were all very obedient and mining peacefully, striving to make contributions. Supremacy Yi was like a proud king as he patrolled the mining area. He was very satisfied with the attitude of the army that had surrendered. "Gather them. Your chance to make contributions is here. Don't say that I didn't give you a chance." Supremacy Yi waved his hand and shouted. The army supervisor quickly gathered the slave army and came to pay respects to Supremacy Yi, this unprecedented commander. Supreme Yi looked at the slave army with a solemn face and pretended to be mature as he said, "I know that you admire me very much and want to become my most loyal private army. Now you have the chance. The enemy is about to invade. As long as you are willing to kill the enemy, you can all become my elite troops. If you kill the enemy's centurion, you can be promoted to centurion. If you kill the enemy's chiliarch, you can directly be promoted to chiliarch. If you can kill the enemy's 10,000-man elder, congratulations, you will become my right-hand man. Are you happy? Are you happy?" The slave army was originally confused, but when they heard Supremacy Ye's promise, their hearts were moved. It was very difficult for a soldier without a backer to be promoted. This was a rare opportunity. The position of centurion and chiliarch was easily available. The eyes of the true experts shone with a glimmer of light. "All of you follow me. I'll reorganize all of you. The opportunity is right in front of you. Whether or not you can seize it depends on yourselves." Supreme Martial Artist Yi waved his hand and ordered the army supervisor to quickly escort this batch of slaves to the east gate of North Town City. Chapter 2577. The army was quickly reorganized and Supreme Yi ordered the 1.3 million soldiers to be ready to attack at any time. Meanwhile, Di Longtian, who was at the border of Heaven's suppressing palace, received the news and brought 300,000 ancient massacre gods to hide 30 miles away from the north of North Guarding City. One wave of attack and they would be able to surround the enemy. Lu Aotian did not mobilize the 30,000 inner sect disciples, nor did he alert the older generation. He only controlled the 300,000 outer sect disciples and stationed them in the south. The 700,000 private soldiers and the 300,000 slaves were all under Supreme Ye's control. The three armies formed a straight line from the north to the south. However, the ancient massacre gods and outer sect disciples were in the dark while Supreme Yi attracted the attention of the enemy. 3 days passed in a flash. Fu Longwen led the million soldiers with Void Cloud as the vanguard. They stepped out of the border and headed straight for North Guarding City. About 10 miles away from North Guarding City, there was a small pit that could only fit one person. In the middle of the pit was a wooden sign that was as tall as 2 men. On it were engraved dozens of enraging words. "Void Cloud's army will be buried here. A gift from Supreme Yi." Void Cloud looked at the words and his eyes turned red. Blood rushed to his head and veins popped out on his forehead. He was filled with killing intent. When two armies are facing each other, we must be careful with our personal emotions. Once we get angry, it will be easy for the enemy to find our weakness. Fu Longwen reminded. Huff, huff, huff. Void Cloud panted heavily and the killing intent in his eyes could not be concealed. He led the army and quickened their pace. When they were about 2.5 kilometers away from North Town City, the city gates suddenly opened. Supreme Venerable Yi held a long spear in his hand and charged out alone in an awe-inspiring manner. "I'm here to fight you. Void Cloud, you idiot. Fight me one-on-one if you have the guts." Supreme Yi raised his spear and shouted. Dong dong dong. Boom boom boom. On the city walls, the drums shook the sky and the horns sounded again and again. The soldiers' morale was high. Supreme Yi was not even a mystic immortal, and as the commander, he dared to challenge a vanguard. Void Cloud and Fu Longwen looked at each other. Is he an idiot? Void Cloud was speechless. Fu Longwen, as the commander and the strategist, couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. He said in a low voice, "Be careful of traps. Since he dares to come, I dare to capture him. Even if there's a trap, this risk is worth taking. After all, we only want to capture Supreme Yi." Void Cloud held his immortal sword and was about to step forward to fight. Before Fu Longwen could speak, Supreme Venerable Yi had already rushed not far ahead.